Okay. I didn't ask how my sound is. But anyways, hi everyone, we're live.
Your
Woo.
sound is amazing.
Oh, phew.
What's
Imagine
up,
we did a whole
Josh?
show. Josh, man, having Josh here, even though it says there's 0 people watching. So Josh may have come in to wave hello
Oh,
and then bounce. But that's still nice. Still nice to say hello. Oh, 3. It just jumped up to
Having-
3.
yes.
Forget it.
Having Josh here lifts my spirits. Having 3 people here lifts my spirits. One
Well,
of
it's
them,
down to-
one
now
of
it's
them
down
was
to
me.
2.
Yeah, I just left.
Oh, sad. I wish you didn't tell me. This would have been a much better show. But okay, so let's do it. Thanks to Jeremy for coming back again. I'll say that on the show. I might as well just start.
JV.
Okay. I'll just remind myself what I was going to say. Okay, I'll just try to figure it out as I go. Okay. Yeah! Late August, yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by 2 guys who will gladly consider signing an offer sheet if any podcast network wants to come our way. We're currently free agents as far as I know. I'm your host, Elon Dubrovsky, and with me are, once again, 2 people. But first of all, you know him, you love him, the fantasy hockey robot, the Poobah prognostication, the IPP MVP himself, Brian Com. Brian, how's it going?
Hey, I'm good. I'm trying to think of what it means that we're free agents. Like
We're
if I'm
restricted free agents.
If I'm, that's better. Like if I'm an NHL free agent on August 18th, I'm not feeling that great. But you know what? We're not free agents, Elon. We're indie.
I see.
That's what we are.
I just want someone to offer me 4.58 million for 2 years.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to call it, that's like, and I'll split that with you. I'm fine to split that.
Oh,
And we'll throw Jeremy some.
That's a great offer. For anybody who wants to take us up on that,
Yeah.
you can find a way to get in touch with us.
And yeah, so like I said, the other person with us because this is part 2 of our Dynasty. This is of us, self-indulging and talking about the Dynasty League that we've been drafting for the last few weeks. Feels like months, a couple months at this point. And yeah, we had an amazing part 1 where we went through the pro side of the draft. And today we're going to talk about all the prospects. So once again, we know him from short shifts, from Matchup Maximizer, multiple appearances, being a key member of our awesome patron community, and future Tier 1 competitor, Jeremy Versillo. Welcome back to the show, Jeremy.
Thanks for having me back. I'm excited to talk some Dynasty. It's not quite redraft prep time for me yet. I kind of filter out the noise, so I have not started any of my Tier 1 prep. But the summer's a great time to talk about Dynasty because Dynasty is evergreen conversation for hockey.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of feel like it's when the projections start really dropping is when I get excited. And actually, Dauber has dropped his projection. But, we're waiting for Dom Luszczyszyn. We're going to do a show with Dom in a few weeks as we do every year. That's when it's exciting. But anyways, yeah, let's focus on the here and now. And yeah, very quickly before we get back into our Dynasty draft, let's mention that Keeping Karlsson is proudly presented by DauberHockey.com. Dadoy, great website. Check it out. Second of all, we have a little bit of NHL news to cover. So yeah, these offer sheets. Okay, so the Blues offer sheeted Philip Broberg, the defenseman they drafted 8th overall like a million years ago. What was it, 2019? 2 years, 4.58 mil, which is pretty crazy considering the rumor is the Oilers were like deciding whether to offer him like 1.8 and he wanted I don't know, it's like around it's like 3 times the contract, I think, or maybe even 4 times. So yeah, like a huge win for Philip. Like I feel like in all the discussion of did the Oilers blew it? Should they match? I feel like it's just the big story is congrats to Philip Broberg, who probably has been feeling really down on himself for these past few years. He was drafted so high, never got a chance. Apparently he's done pretty well. Seems from the stats anyways, he's done pretty well in the AHL. Finally got in for some playoff games last year. He had a really great Stanley Cup final from the vibes I read on Twitter. And look at him. All of a sudden now he's cashed in big time for at least the next 2 seasons. The question obviously there's Dylan Holloway is the other one. 2 years, 2.29 mil. We don't know what's going to happen yet, and so I don't think we should spend too much time talking about the fantasy implications. I will just say, if Broberg goes to St. Louis, I do feel like St. Louis is one of those rare teams where we don't really have a locked-in top power play quarterback. I'm not saying Broberg is pencil him in for that or anything like that, obviously. But, Scott Perunovich doesn't seem like someone who could be so difficult to bump. Justin Falk has been there. He's been bumped many times by a Perunovich. Torrey Krug. Well, Torrey Krug's injured forever. I don't even know if he's playing to start the season. So I think there'd be some intrigue there if the Oilers don't match the Broberg offer sheet. Though, of course, to add a little bit of intrigue, just today the Oilers made a trade to get Vasily Podkolzin from the Canucks in exchange for a fourth-round draft pick. And keep in mind that Podkolzin is someone that has a contract right now. And the Oilers, you would think, would be trying to shed contracts and shed salary to be able to match these offer sheets. So the speculation, of course, is that if they traded for Podkolzin, that probably means they're probably not planning on matching at least one of these offer sheets. And, when you think about, forward for forward, maybe Holloway is the one who they're not going to match, and they've just decided they'll get a cheaper Podkolzin. So all of that said, Brian, any fantasy implications to you at this hour?
I don't think so. I mean, we're about to enter some Dynasty discussion, which will, maybe get into some actually Podkolzin, I think, was sort of recently taken, very late in our Dynasty.
He was near the end of the pro draft.
Yeah. So
barely over 100 games played.
Yeah, I think I think maybe the biggest impact. I know you're really high on Broberg. I think my question for you is, if he was drafted 10 picks later, would you be equally high on Broberg, or is it just his draft position that's talking to you? Because I remember when the Oilers drafted him, the immediate take on Twitter was whoa, too soon.
For sure. And to be fair, I'm not super high. I mentioned to you that maybe we should trade for him. And also I was thinking we should draft him at one point right before he got taken, before we had the chance. So I guess I was thinking, if Broberg goes to St. Louis and they offered him 4.5 mil and there's potentially an open power play, that interests me. If he stays on Edmonton, maybe he now becomes a regular NHLer. But there's still obviously Bouchard there. So I wouldn't expect too much of a fantasy impact. Jeremy, any thoughts on the three? Brian.
Yeah, let me just wrap that piece there. I'll say the opportunity in St. Louis may or may not be top power play, but I would hope for $4.5 million they're going to play him more than the 12.5 minutes a night that Broberg has averaged over the course of his career. His average ice time, it's not a great sign, has actually gone down each season, starting at 13.5 minutes as I don't know. He only played 23 games, so that's his first year in the NHL, but I don't think officially his rookie season because of the games played. Then 12.5 minutes in 22-23 and 11.5 minutes last year. So there were clearly signs of even fading. What little confidence the Oilers had in Broberg faded over the time he was with them. So a fresh start could be good. $4.5 million seems like money you want to give to someone who you think can fill a top 4 role. So we'll see if he's capable of doing that, and I guess the comp in my head, because you're $4.5 million is a big investment, and the comp in my head is or the recent one, and it's not a direct, it's more situational than anything else, but is Jesperi Kotkaniemi, right? I don't know if you remember when Carolina offered him, what was it, near 5? It was $5 million. It was oh, okay, so they're going to give him that much, and they're going to put him in a big role to do some damage. And there was some speculative drafting of Kotkaniemi last year because of it, which paid off in rare moments, and it was likely more paid off as a free agent ad because he wasn't doing enough to be fantasy relevant through the year. And his ice time, actually, he saw the second. It's been similar, but his ice time was actually cut almost 2 minutes this year compared to the last year in Carolina. All that to say, new team, new opportunity for Broberg.
Maybe not. I'm saying I think maybe the Oilers are going to match it now that I look at them getting Podkolzin. So
yeah. Potentially. Either way, I'm not sure that the dollar investment, I think what I'm trying to end up with here is the dollar, so far the indications aren't that Broberg is ready for a bigger role. And the Kotkaniemi sort of comment was to sort of say the dollar investment doesn't necessarily equate to bigger opportunity, but it might be an opportunity versus nearly no opportunity, which is where Broberg's coming from.
No one's going to pay him 4.5 mil to play 12 minutes a night or go to the minors. That's for sure. Also, Kotkaniemi, correct me if I'm wrong, he did center the second line for a bit. I feel like he got the opportunity. I think it just turned out he's not that good. Kotkaniemi wasn't worth the money, but I feel like Carolina did give him a chance, though maybe some Habs or Canes fans can remind me. Jeremy, any thoughts on these three guys, Podkolzin, Holloway, Broberg? Do either of them go up in your, like, are either of them becoming someone you consider drafting in a 1-year league next year, or is it all just like, intriguing guys, let's see what they do?
I am kind of interested in Broberg if he ends up on St. Louis. Just like you mentioned, there's rumors that Torrey Krug may miss the entire season. I think it was arthritis in his ankle that was going to be reevaluated before training camp. Still don't have news on that. Perunovic is actually, I was just looking him up. He's like 26 years old now. Like he's like hitting
Time
the end
flies.
of, he's hitting the end of you need to show you can do something as a prospect. Falk's probably the obvious power play guy, but he's 32 going on 33. Parayko plays a lot of minutes and is over 30. So maybe they do just want someone to run maybe the second power play there. And Broberg did show stuff last year, especially in the playoffs. I was really impressed with his play. I think the big thing for whether or not Edmonton matches is going to come down to the money. St. Louis very intentionally put them in a challenging spot with the cap. And so I'm very interested in how this plays out in the next 48 hours, I think is how long they have to match.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I think that we could talk a lot longer. Like I have a lot of thoughts, but that's not really the purpose of this show. So, and I'm sure there's lots of good podcasts you can listen to. I've been listening to what was it? The Athletic dropped a really good episode talking about it right as it happened. But anyway, okay, let's go to the main purpose of why we're here, which is to talk about this Dynasty draft. So for those of you who didn't listen last week, well, maybe check out that episode and then come back to this one. It might make more sense than just jumping here, unless you just really only care about prospects. But quick recap. We have been drafting a Keeping Karlsson Dynasty League for the past couple of months. It's the rosters are 26 pro spots and 30 minors spots. And the cutoff is 100 games played for a skater and 50 games played for a goalie. That's like who's eligible for pro or who's for minors. And it's a categories league. Goals, assists, shots, hits, blocks, special teams points. Pretty basic stuff. Goalies are pretty much wins and save percentage, but the fancy Fantrax versions of those. So yeah, 2 out of the 8 categories are goalies, just to give that context. And yeah, so Brian and I talked through our pro drafts and Jeremy, up until round 18 in the last episode. Brian and I ended that episode talking about how we went 4 rounds in a row, filling out our D with Provorov, Eric Brandstrom, Andrew Peak, and Kevin Ball. So there were still 7 more pro draft rounds in the pro draft up to round 26. So we'll just quickly cover those rounds, and then obviously the meat of this episode we'll be talking about the prospect draft, because that's where things get really interesting with every single NHL player who's been eligible for a draft. So it doesn't even have to be an NHL player. Anyone who's been eligible for an NHL draft that's played fewer than 100 games or 50 for a goalie. But very quickly, so Brian, in round 19, where were we? Just for people interested. Oh, we grabbed Peyton Krebs in round 19, which was just definitely, we're at the point now where there's, basically no one left. Like if you'll take a look at keepingkarlsson.com/dynasty for the draft results. But Brian and I still have this plan of going young. At this point, these are swings, right? We're just taking someone that, he was drafted high a long time ago, back in 2019. Oh, same year as Broberg. Peyton Krebs, I guess another bust from that draft, 17th overall. But Krebs, so whatever. We'll see. He hits a bit. Maybe he could use a fresh start, or who knows. I don't have high hopes for him. The next round, actually, we didn't have a pick. The following round, literally the same type of pick. We took Cody Glass, who was a first-round pick way back in, 2017. So it's been a while. Already 25 years old for Cody Glass. Also drafted by the Vegas Golden Knights. Also traded away and turned out to be a bust somewhere else. But Cody Glass actually just recently got traded to Pittsburgh. Who knows if maybe that'll be good. I'm interested. I'm happy that I saw that trade. Then the next round, we got Esa Lindell, who I was actually pretty surprised to get a somewhat quality defenseman so late. He's older, doesn't really fit our general plan, but 30 years old, 1 more year in the contract. The idea there was to just get someone that maybe we can trade at the deadline, or whatever. Hopefully he gets a cheap contract somewhere else later. Then we got Vitek Vanacek. If you recall, we had 3 goalies drafted in that last episode. We took Skinner, then Vasilevsky, then Blackwood. At this point, I think Vanacek was the last goalie remaining that I expected to get NHL games this season. Right before him, Elvis Merzlikins had gone, and before him, Dan Vladar had gone. So this is the level we're at. So we thought, might as well. We have 4 max goalies, so might as well take him. Then Joel Armia, Nathan Bastian, who we took for hits, and then in the last round, we took a defenseman named Jordan Harris, who is, I'm sure Habs fans know who he is, 24 years old. Has never done anything, but we'll see. Still pretty young. So that was it for us. Brian, any thoughts on any of those final picks we made to finish our pro draft before we go to Jeremy to talk about the vast options of middling to low end players that were taken by other teams that he finds interesting?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think you sort of got it right from the top, which was that we're going for upside here. So that's why we've got Krebs and Cody Glass. I don't know if it's a good sign or not that he was like dealt to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, as a cap dump, by the way.
Yeah, as a cap dump. You know, he could play on Malkin or Crosby's wing, I guess. Like that, but there was upside for him in Nashville too. He's also a center, but if he's on the third or fourth, if he's not on their line, then that would be obviously no news for him. Krebs is someone who, had a good deal of potential when he was drafted, and just has not done anything of note. Vanacek was your brainchild. I think my position on Vanacek has been pretty clear.
I mean, but to be fair, Vanacek was good 2 seasons ago, right? And he's
No.
how old is he?
You know
we
what?
don't have to dive too deep into him.
I feel like we talked about him before.
He's 28.
Yeah, he's 28, and gosh, okay, I'll look up the numbers that
I mean, I'll tell you this right now. I don't regret the pick. He has 1 year left on his contract, even if he sucks. Whatever. He was like literally the last goalie.
So he was not great in his first year. He was pretty good in his second year with Washington, and then he was pretty good in his third year with New Jersey, and then bad last year in New Jersey. So he's got 2 good years, 2 bad years, about equally, above average as he is below average. So I guess we'll see what can come of this. And you're right. I'm pretty sure I saw this when we were trying to draft him too, that maybe he does deserve another chance, a new look.
If we're going for the first overall pick potentially, might as well have the Blackhawks tandem.
The Sharks tandem.
The Sharks tandem.
Yeah. Well, that's it, right? Like the thing is that if Vanacek is any good, I don't know if we're gonna find that out while he's in San Jose's net, but we also just need the games, I think. So for our overall strategy, I think it works out just fine.
Mm-hmm. All right, so Jeremy, rounds 19 through 26. So after this, we'll go very micro. Maybe look at the prospect draft like 10 picks at a time, because that's where we get to exciting names. But I'm curious to know if there's any names that jump out at you like, wow, I can't believe you got this guy so late in the pro draft.
So I had a handful of names I listed. I'll just go in order that they were drafted. I liked your Peyton Krebs pick. I think he's kind of stuck on the third line in Buffalo and probably will be, but I think he's a good player that, may show himself to have more fantasy relevance, in a couple years. I liked someone took Luke Shen, which is just a nice fill your hits and blocks type of guy for cheap. Sam Girard is an interesting one. The contract isn't great, but I think that, as you know, Colorado is going to have to make choices on their defenders. He may end up somewhere else and may be able to blossom. I think he's got a lot of offensive talent and would be a guy I'd keep my eye on if he ever ends up traded. Alex Nylander, kind of min contract. I thought eye test wise, he showed something in Columbus last year. Columbus obviously didn't think so, and now he signed in Toronto to play with his brother. I think that's it's either a PTO or a minor league contract.
Yeah,
maybe.
But he signed a contract with the Marlies, but obviously that still means that they can sign him to a contract and call him up whenever.
Yeah, I thought it was really weird that he didn't get any NHL contract offers, but
we had a question on our last patron cast where someone asked, like, who are some he was like, there's a lot of players that we talk about who are like great IRL, but like not great for fantasy. And then we gave an example of like Jacob Slavin is like always comes up as like one of the top defensemen, but he's like, anyways, then the person asked like, what's an example of the opposite, a player who's good for fantasy but not IRL? And I was like, someone like, Alex Nylander jumped to mind, like him. Also like Daniel Sprong came to mind for me. It's like these guys, like whenever we bring them up on the podcast every once in a while because they go on like a run and are scoring goals. I'm like, oh, these guys must be good. Add them to your fantasy, stream these guys in. But then it like comes to free agency and like neither of them could get a contract, or maybe could get like a minimum contract. So it's interesting. But maybe there is some upside there for Nylander, especially if there's an injury in Toronto at some point.
I liked Vanacek as a pick, specifically because you guys already had Blackwood. Like, why not lock up the tandem? And if one of them all of a sudden turns the Sharks into a decent team, you then have that value on your team. They're both pretty young. For a goalie at least. And,
for a goalie.
I can't believe I'm saying this, and this should never be quoted and attributed to me. I kind of like the Seth Jones pick. Uh, Obviously, that contract is memes as far as you can go, and everybody knows it's a terrible contract. But I think that was the last round of the draft. That team obviously knows what their cap situation is, so you're not handcuffing yourself for later. You obviously just came in under cap to begin with, and you're picking up the power play one quarterback for Connor Bedard and someone who's going to get you points, power play points, at least a decent amount of shots, hits, and blocks. Like, I like Seth Jones as a player, even if the contract kind of sucks.
Yeah, I actually don't mind. Like at that point of the draft, you're basically just calling dibs, right? Like you're getting rights to a player because in this league you can drop a guy up until the puck drop for the season.
Oh yeah, we didn't mention that before. Yes.
Yeah, it might be important to know. Do you want to add anything to that, Elon?
No, that's a good point. We didn't say that at the top. So, like, once the league starts, then the rule is going to be you can't drop someone unless their contract is over. And if you want to buy them out, you have to still pay half their contract for the rest of the duration. But we made an exception just for this first year. Like, before the very first puck drop, you can drop anyone. So the person who drafted Seth Jones could just drop him. We'll see. And I mean, the question is, like,
retain like worst case is like you retain half. Right?
Like, oh, you're saying by buying them out, or maybe you trade, and maybe someone will give you a decent return if you retain.
Well, that's it. I figured you could probably deal him. You'll have to eat some salary. We'll see how much based on how how things look with Connor Bedard, like with this season, and with we'll get to some other names in our prospect draft who are coming up and could get that top power play role, which would diminish Jones's value. Although Seth Jones, the last couple seasons, hasn't produced much on the power play and has still been roughly a 40-point player, which I think he might continue to be able to do from the second power play unit if that's where he ends up. His blocks are healthy, like Jeremy mentioned. His hits, his shots, he's a good category filler. He's really expensive. Category
9.5 mil.
Yeah. So, but again, I don't think it's an awful swing to take late in the draft, and I appreciate Jeremy's got some good call outs here.
For sure.
Yeah.
I will say with Seth Jones, if he was dropped before the draft, I definitely would not pick him up. Like, I will say that. Like, I don't want that contract because even if it's looking good now, we'll see how it looks. Like, now he's 29. The contract's going to go until he's age 35. And so I don't know. Like, we'll see how he holds up. And also, and we'll see how his role holds up as, like, Lev Chunov and Korchinski come in. But for a win now, like, if the team that drafted Seth Jones is trying to win, like, this year or next year, could be worth it. Who cares if you have a bad contract 4 years down the road if you've got a championship under your belt? So that's obviously a key consideration there. All right. So with that, do we have the green light here to switch over to the prospects draft? Let's do it. Okay. So obviously the first pick of the draft went to the flip of who had the first pick in the pro draft. I think in the pro draft it was a pretty obvious pick. Connor McDavid went first overall. I feel like there could have been, like, I would have been open to listening to arguments for potentially who goes first overall in the pro draft. Maybe you'd go like, oh, McKinnon's like kind of expensive. Maybe I want to like save money. I don't know, whatever. I could hear something. I think that would have been it would have been absolutely insane to see anyone but Connor Bedard go first in the prospects draft. I think that was like as soon as we drafted the draft order, it was like, congratulations to two brothers. You have Connor Bedard. Enjoy. Superstar for a long time. It'll be fun to see like what his first contract is, if he just gets like max right off the gate, or if what happens. But hey, for a year, 2 more years, I guess he's got the ELC, which will be the biggest bargain contract like ever, I guess, aside from what McDavid was, when McDavid was on his ELC. Too bad Chicago's probably not going to be contending and taking advantage of that. But yeah, Bedard's amazing. Let me tell you the first 10 picks of the prospect draft. And once again, I'll say it one more time. Skaters, less than 100 games played, or goalies, less than 50 games played. So yeah, Bedard, then Macklin Celebrini, Matvei Michkov, Ivan Demidov went fourth, who just got picked in this draft. So we've got Celebrini and Demidov, the first and the fifth pick. Okay, then fifth overall, Luke Hughes, the first defenseman taken in this prospects draft. Then Adam Fantilli, then Leo Karlsson, Logan Stankoven, then another defenseman, Artem Levshunov, who we just mentioned. Then at 10th overall, Brock Faber, who had signed the contract before this pick. So the team called keeping Karlsson, but it's not Brian and I. It might be confusing, but they did draft Karlsson. So Brock Faber signed an 8-year, $68 million contract, and I guess the team keeping Karlsson saw that and was like, I don't care, I still want him. And hey, I mean, obviously the Minnesota Wild made that decision and they're thinking it's going to be great for them, but I just wanted to put that context in. It's not as if they got like blindsided by a big contract after the pick. So that's the top 10. Yeah, I guess Jeremy. Maybe I'll just go a couple more and get to our pick, just to like, because we picked a couple of. So then Dylan Genther went 11, then Logan Cooley went 12th, and then Brian and I took Alexander Nikishin, who I'm excited to talk about. But maybe we could go up to Nikishin. Jeremy can tell us, what he thinks about these. I mean, all these prospects you could have big, long conversations about. These are all exciting guys. I'm curious if you saw any value in any of those guys leading up to Nikishin, and then we can talk about if you think Brian and I blew it or not. But we'll get our opportunity to defend the pick first.
I definitely liked your Nikishin pick. Like, that was one of my favorite picks in the first round. I think he's an NHL-ready defenseman that should be over possibly this spring when the KHL playoffs end. I forget the exact rules about when you have to be on a roster by in order to be eligible for playoffs, but I think he could have a Shea Weber type of profile, and that's really good in this league.
Right.
The other first-round guy I really liked the value on, Logan Stankoven, went 8th overall. I think he's got a ton of upside and really lit the league on fire last year. Like, I think he's up there in the potential Calder favorites this year, because I don't think he hit 25 games last year. He'll be competing.
24.
24, exactly. They planned that. That was intentional. I will bet that's intentional. But it'll be like him and Michkov and Celebrini fighting for that. Other than that, I think all pretty good picks, like pretty chalky. I'm glad that the team who picked Faber knew about the contract beforehand, because that would have just been really upsetting if they had picked it without knowing about that. But now that they knew about it, so that was like part of the calculus for the pick. So I'm glad that timing worked out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Brian, back to us. So we, if you recall, talking about the pro draft, like we really faded D, right? Our top D pick was Jamie Drysdale, like pretty late, round 8, and then we took Liljegren in round 11. And at that point, I think you and I were talking like we for sure need to focus on D in the prospects draft. And I remember just like early on, just like being in love with Nikishin. I saw some article by who's that guy? What's Craig Button dropped an article like in January or something, the top 50 prospects or whatever. And like Nikishin was number 2, and he's highly ranked. Obviously, though, he's a guy in the KHL. Like we hope that he'll come over. He'll go to Carolina. Brian, I know you had some reservations about Carolina. I was kind of thinking, yeah, like it's gonna be so perfect. He'll like take over from Burns or Gostisbehere or whoever's running the power play this year, and then in a year from now he'll take over. So he'll be top power play and he'll get all the hits and blocks and shots. This guy also, for people who don't know, he won the KHL like MVP last year. So this is like the most, and he had like 55 points in 60 something games for a defenseman. So doing really well in the K. I'm hoping he's the D version of Panarin. But Brian, like I feel like I did a lot of convincing at this point. You had to like agree with me to take the pick because you knew it would like kill me to not. But can you remind me how you were feeling at that point?
Yeah. So I guess, Genther and Cooley had gone just before. Like there were a few names that I wanted to consider ahead of Nikishin, but a bunch of them were taken, so that helped. The Carolina thing I detailed on the last episode when we were talking about Svechnikov. Like I'm not sure I can really, and you know what, I like to. We can't predict, 10 years down the road or whatever, what Carolina's situation, or even 3 to 5 years if Carolina's still going to be playing this like very even keel offense distribution. Although I'm actually not as concerned from the defensive side. I think there's a lot more potential to be that singular offensive presence and contributor from the back end than any forward could be. So I think Nikishin has more opportunity that way. I guess the other guys who went after him were Will Smith. I think if I'm remembering right, it was Nikishin, Will Smith, and Cutter Gauthier. were sort of the three that I was between, and two of those three went in the next three picks. I might have also been making a case for actually no, that was it. Elon, I don't know why you're saying I wasn't that on board with Nikishin. I think I was.
No, you were.
Yeah,
I think you were, but I think like you had, like you said, some of the guys that ended up being taken beforehand, like like I was willing to take Nikishin over those guys, and I think at that point, like you said, we might have had a conversation about Ganther and Logan Cooley. But yeah, once it got to this point, I think it was basically him or Will Smith, and I think we were both like, especially just like needing D. That was the other thing. Like we just like really didn't take any D in the pro draft, so we need someone that we could stamp on, and like the next D taken was Brant Clark, who I don't think I was ready to take.
It was actually Minchukov, a couple picks before Clark and a few picks after Nikishin. So yeah, like the next D taken were Clark, Yurichek, Boyum, Lane Hudson, who I know you had your eye on.
Oh, for sure.
But Lane Hudson went after our next pick, so we actually
so we'll talk about that there. Yeah. But I really like our next pick, but we'll get there. So okay, let's round out then this first round. So after Nikishin, Will Smith, Shane Wright, Cutter Gauthier, now of the Anaheim Ducks, because of bad management by Philly. Pavel Minchukov, like you said, Brian. Then William Eklund at 18, Brant Clark at 19, and then finishing off the first round of the prospects draft, and then starting the following round, last great Canadian dynasty, Derek's team. He decided to just grab two goalies, and he took Joseph Woll and Jesper Wallstedt. Just like, there you go. I'm done. I'm taking care of my. But actually, then ended up taking another goalie with his following pick, which is pretty interesting in Annunen. But that's already like a long time down the road. But yeah, Woll and Wallstedt. So I guess that's where Derek decided he was going to fill his goalies after. I'm looking back on who Derek took in the pro draft, and yeah, I definitely see why he made those decisions, because his pro goalies were Frederick Anderson, Jonathan Quick, and Calvin Pickard. And I think that's it. So yeah, definitely now having Woll and Wallstedt and Annunen make a big difference. Jeremy, any thoughts on the end of the first round of the prospects draft? Any value picks there? Any guys that you were surprised were in the first round or fell out of the first round?
I really liked the Smith and Gauthier picks at the end of the first round. I think those are two guys that we're going to see a lot more of in the next couple of years. Those were always nice. Other than that, everyone else seems like a pretty reasonable first round pick. It's all kind of the big name prospects, the ones that would be marked as blue chip or can't miss or top tier, top couple tiers, whatever the lists you want to read have. So I'm nothing really surprising yet in the first round and one pick. I do think there's one coming up that I'm going to point out that I was like, this guy should have gone like top 5. I can't believe he's in the second round.
Okay, well, I'm excited to. Ooh, this will be fun. As I read through it, I'm going to try to guess. And then, Brian, you can also jump in if you want to guess. But okay, so I'll go now up to our next pick. So this Woll and Wallstedt, that started a goalie run. First, low Stony Devs, who had traded for this pick, took Juracek, another defenseman. And then we saw Dustin Wolf and Devin Levi. They went back to back. And then Gabe Perreault, Ryan Leonard, who I had my eye on, by the way. Is that the guy, by the way? Is it Ryan Leonard, Jeremy?
It is.
Yeah, I had my eye on him as well. Like, if he would have fallen, he would have been really hard not to take. Then Zeev Buyum was taken right before us. And then, it was over to Brian and I. And at this point, I'll just say that I don't think, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we were like planning on taking a goalie in the second round necessarily. But we were at a point here where now there's been 27 prospect picks, and the goalies taken were, like I said, Woll, Wallstedt, Wolf, Devin Levi. It was clearly we were like in a goalie run, or it seemed like it anyway. I guess after us, actually, a goalie didn't get taken. But there was like every single place I check for like who are the top prospect goalies, it's always Wallstedt and Askarov 1 and 2. Sometimes Askarov's number 1, sometimes Wallsted's number 1. But I think the reason why everyone was passing on Yaroslav Askarov is because even though he's been like he's been amazing in the AHL. Like he hasn't done anything to disappoint anybody, right? Like he's met his pedigree from when he was drafted 11th overall in 2020, and maybe even has improved where he would be drafted if they did a redraft. But Nashville, just like a few weeks earlier, or maybe a month or so earlier, had extended UC Saros 8 years on a big money contract, and I think that scared a lot of people away from him, and reasonably so. Like I'm not really sure where he fits in there. He's obviously not going to be a starter in Nashville for a very long time. Of course, there is the possibility that he could get traded. I think he's asked for a trade. Correct me if I'm wrong. But anyways, just seemed like at this point, how can we not take? We've already got the guy who I thought was like the number one prospect defenseman. Why not take also a guy who could arguably say is the number one prospect goalie? So yeah, Brian, I think this was for us a pretty easy choice. Like you said, Lane Hudson went next. We both liked him. Zane Parik we'd been talking about because again we were talking about like we really need to fill out that D, and I did like, and Zeev Boom was also someone that was interesting, but I felt like it was an easy choice for us to go Askarov here because it's like such a big dip to the next available goalie.
Yeah, I like you sort of started this by saying like I don't know if we were for sure good with planning to take a goalie. I think we definitely were.
Even if Askarov had been taken, I don't think we would have taken a goalie with that pick. Like if let's say Zeev Boom didn't get taken.
But Askarov sort of bucked that trend. Like Askarov was the one goalie we would take there. And I'm actually going back to our DMs from a few weeks back where we were talking about, it's going to be Askarov or Zane Parik. And we were like both filled a need for us. And Askarov, was just too good. I mean, you were heartbroken that we didn't get Wallstedt. Given that 4 goalies went before our second prospect pick.
Is that really? I feel like I obviously wanted Wallstedt, but I feel like I was reasonable. Like I must have been realistic. I didn't expect him, did I? To actually fall to that.
I think
pick?
we were hoping, but nice. against hope. Where we got him, especially given our sort of dire goaltending situation, getting I agree, a consensus top 2 goalie prospect who, Saros is blocking him, and maybe that's why we were able to get him as late as we did. But that's not really a problem for you and I at this moment. That's like a tomorrow problem. So, Askarov probably looked a little better before Saros signed that big long-term contract that locked him in for even longer in Nashville's commitment. One of the points you made to me was like, oh, but Askarov has asked for a trade since then. So, he'll go get opportunity somewhere, and we'll see. We'll see how all that shakes. But I'm happy to have him and wait. And, your predilection for Russians is really clear in this moment with Nikishin and Askarov, and
it's not going to end.
Our next couple picks also Russian.
Well, I think there's something to like. I don't know. The Russians seem to fall a little bit.
Here's my theory: is that you fell in love with Russians when you hashtag Team Panarin, like back in season 3, 4 of the show. Where you were like, this guy, Panarin, is coming over from Russia. I'm all in on him.
Well, I remember the next one was also Kaprizov, where it just turned out so amazing with him.
So I think you just have this idea that anybody who's gets a little older than they usually do to make their NHL debut and then comes over from Russia, is money. So
yeah, but it's a little different between like obviously Nikishin follows that trend. Like Askarov's been in the AHL, so he's just like whatever. He's just like anybody else. Like, I don't think for him, I even considered that he's Russian. It was just he's a top prospect. He's ranked 1 or 2. But we'll get to some other picks later on where definitely I had that thought. But so Jeremy, what do you think about not only our Askarov pick, but any of those other picks I've said since the start of round 2 here?
Askarov, I think, is a great pick. I think consensus top 2's a good way to describe him and Wallstedt as far as prospect goalies. Personally, I like Askarov a bit better, but I do understand that he's more blocked. I'll be shocked if he's not playing full-time NHL games somewhere in the next 3 years, though. He's just that good. It would be criminal for Nashville to keep him playing in the AHL for that long. I think as Saros gets older, maybe they end up in a bit of a 50-50, or maybe he gets the trade he's asked for. They definitely have an embarrassment of riches there. He could be a nice trade chip given how Nashville built their team this summer. Askarov could be a nice trade chip to, get that superstar on an expiring contract for a playoff push type of thing. So you never know. It's not hard to predict the future with that. So I agree with just taking the really good player.
And then, so why don't you speak a little bit on, Ryan Leonard, who you said you were shocked he didn't go in the first round?
Yeah, I think Ryan Leonard's so good. I think he's going to hit all of the categories in this league too, because he's that power forward mold. I think he's going to get you the hits. I think he's going to get you all the power play stuff, the shots, the goals, the assists. I would have taken him in the top 4 in this league. Like I would not have taken him over Bedard, Celebrini, or Michkov, but I probably would have taken him 4th in this type of
Wow.
setup.
That's
So,
that'll be really fun to look back on in a couple years. That was two brothers, by the way, who did the same people who we traded Jack Hughes to. So they traded up to get both Gabe Perreault and Ryan Leonard with back-to-back picks.
and
So
they got
obviously they're
Bedard.
happy to hear you say it. And they have Bedard and they have Jack Hughes. So nice little core there. Brian, sorry, you were gonna jump in.
No, it's okay. We're good. No, I was actually off mic. I was gonna make the point that just like try to say that try and say the player's name more often instead of pronouns.
The player's name.
Yeah, that's
okay.
all. That's just an off mic comment. Okay,
good one. All right, so then let's move on to the rest of this round. Then round 2. So yeah, after we took Askarov, then New Hamilton took Lane Hudson, then went Zach Benson, then Matthew Nyes, then a guy who was taken in this most recent draft, Caden Lindstrom, who's of the Columbus Blue Jackets, then Zane Parekh, who is the defenseman that Brian and I were going to likely take if Askarov had been taken, then Sam Dickinson, another guy from this most recent draft, then Simon Nemec, a defenseman from a couple drafts ago. I believe, when was Nemec taken already? Yeah, 2022, second overall. Speaking of blocked, Nemec is apparently really great, of course, second overall pick. But yeah, he's got Luke Hughes and currently Dougie Hamilton, and yeah, some other guys that New Jersey has picked. New Jersey likes taking these defensemen, but it'll be interesting to see where Nemec slots in. But okay, then Tyson Forrester from Philly, Yuri Kulich from Buffalo, Berkeley Catton. He was taken with the 18th pick of the round. Then Beckett Sinek, another 2024 guy. And then, last pick of the round was us again, because this is from when we traded Jack Hughes. One of the return we got, we'd already talked about how we got Stützle. Then we got that pick in the 3rd round of the pro draft that we used for Lafreniere. And then the other big return was this pick at the end of the 2nd round of the prospects draft. And we used it to take our second defenseman, prospect defenseman who we really wanted to shore up that position, and we took Olen Zellweger from Anaheim, who I guess is going to battle with Mintyukov for the top power play for years to come. And it's funny because in my other dynasty I had Mintyukov as my only good prospect with Maddie for a few years, and then we had 1 year of having him and it was fun, and then we ended up trading him in a package to get Nathan McKinnon, so definitely no regrets. So I was big on Mintyukov's better than Zellweger, forget about Zellweger, he stinks, and now I'm totally on the other side. Now I really hope that Zellweger ends up winning out there. But yeah, Brian, do you recall? I think that was also we didn't really have too much discussion. I think we were excited to get Zellweger there if he was going to fall. For a few picks before, we were I really hope he falls, but maybe you can correct my memory there.
No, I think that's right. I've wanted sort of the Ducks' future power play quarterback, and our choice was sort of made for us because Mintyukov was taken early on in the draft, just back in the 1st round, a couple picks after we grabbed Nikishin. So yeah, I don't think there was a whole lot. I think in terms of D, the others on the board at the time that we might have been looking at were Kevin Korchinski in Chicago. But he is competition, right? From,
Lev
Shunov, that's right. And
Seth Jones, as we've discussed.
Right, and yeah, sort of. Probably not in our window, but we'll see. Edvinson, who was I'm just going by over the next D that we're taking. Edvinson.
Oh, but you missed the first one that got taken after him from your Ottawa Senators.
Oh, Carter Yakimchuk. That's right. Yeah. Which sure. I mean, I'm not sure. Apparently, he's got some. There's a lot of guys. I'm no one really stood out above Zellweger for me. I'll take the guy who already seems to be sort of on the cusp and in a competition versus anyone who hasn't quite entered that sphere yet. I'm looking at all the D that were taken since from outside the top few rounds, and I mean I'm also not a huge prospects knower. This is also about the moment where I'm mostly going to back out of the episode because what I'll mostly have to offer are being these names sound made up or that's a really great name. I'll just offer hockey name analysis.
Which I'm sure people will love.
Yeah, like I'm seeing, when we get to round 37, there's a guy named John Mustard. That really jumps
You
off
like?
the draft board to me.
Well, I know that you're you're like what isn't one of your favorite movies, Clue, the '80s movie Clue.
Oh, such a good movie. Yeah.
So there you go.
So again, yeah, at this point in the draft, like to be fully transparent, like Elon, you were basically just giving me the names of guys and describing, saying, I'm really excited about this guy, or here's a list of guys. And I just was like, yeah, okay, sounds good. And then you'd like name a couple more. I'm like, okay. And like sometimes I'd look a little bit into them, and sometimes I wouldn't. And
All right, so I'll try to give
yeah,
some
I think you might want to throw to Jeremy first from here on in, and then
right.
I can add more later. I'm just trying to who did we pick next? Oh yeah.
Next up, we took
McGordy?
Yurov, another one
Yurov,
of my
yeah.
Russian favorites.
Yeah,
we'll get to that.
we
But
went back
Jeremy,
to
before
Russian.
we get to that,
Yeah.
let's talk about all those picks from Hudson to Zellweger. Who jumps out to you?
Not anyone in particular, but what really jumped out to me is how some teams were going for some of the older, I'll call them more post-hype guys, more proven commodities. I mean, Tyson Forrester's a bit older, Matthew Nyes is a bit older, Simo Nemec is young, but he's already played a full season, versus people going for the 2024 guys who I'd argue have higher upside, but maybe more risk. I mean, we don't know if Zane Perek's going to ever play an NHL game. I would like to think so. I'd like to think
You'd
he
hope
will
so.
and be a really good player. But the fact is, first-round players bust all the time. So it's just an interesting difference in draft strategy. And I think it's hard to judge any one of those picks as good or bad without having their full team context. So
Yeah.
just wanted to say
Well, I
that
think-
like these are all good prospects, and I like a lot of the picks in a vacuum.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I mean, I think in general you can just sort of like just talk about which prospects excite you, and like not necessarily about like is it a good pick or a bad pick, because also there's the whole context of like some people are trying to win now, and so they're going for prospects that are going to help them like this season. Because there's a really valuable thing in a dynasty league like this is to have these guys who are called like swing eligible, where you can like play them. You have them in your minor spot, then you move them to your pro spot to play them when their team plays, and you move them back to a minor spot and play another of your minors guys. Especially once you start having injuries, because in a league like this you can't just like pick up free agents. First of all, there are no good free agents, and second of all, even if there is one guy, like once you add him, you can't just drop him, right? You have to like buy him out, and you only have a certain number of buyouts, and that cuts against your cap. So I think there's a reason, like I could see a reason why a Brock Faber goes in the first round, even though maybe there's some other guys who have higher upside. But like the team that drafted Brock Faber, they have Kucherov, Panarin, Eichel, Crosby, like Eric Karlsson, Steven Stamkos. Like they're clearly going for it now. Like this team, I think we talked about it in the pro draft. Like this team keeping Karlsson is gonna be a mess in like 5 years, but they're hoping they have like a couple championships under their belt by then. And so there's a reason you just take Brock Faber, who might be like one of the best guys who were taken in the prospects draft in terms of like next season. Like if you just look at like ranking these guys for who's going to be the best in Cupful next year, I'll bet you Brock Faber might get drafted first. It'll be interesting. Who do you take, Faber, or do you take Michkov or Celebrini? Well, I guess Bedard. Anyways, whatever. So so I think that's that context there too. But I'll obviously just be interested to hear your thoughts on these prospects, Jeremy. So
I'll throw a couple out that I like then.
Sure.
Caden Lidstrom was one of my favorite defensemen in the 24, or one of my favorite players in the 2024 draft, and Zane Perek was my favorite defenseman in the draft. So definitely like those two picks, kind of shoot for the moon players. I've always been a huge Zellweger fan. I've been holding him for I think 3 years now in my my dynasty, which is like
that's fun. We can cheer for him together.
Yeah, like my dynasty is one of my dynasties is a bit weirder, where it is a cap league, but we set the contracts by like it's basically an auction league, except for the auction values are 12 million instead of $100. So but yeah, I do love Zellweger. I really hope that he takes power play 1 and runs with it this year. He was really fun to watch when he was in Everett, which is the WHL team just north of Seattle. Watching him basically take a mediocre team and as a defenseman shoot 10 to 12 times a game was utterly insane. He was like the sole source of their offense for a year there, and it was really fun to watch.
All right, so hopefully it's like just because Minchukov was there first doesn't mean he gets to hold the job. It's just like Thanks for the audition, Pavel, but we're going another direction. That's how I hope things happen now. All right, so let's continue then into the third round of the prospect draft. Still a lot of really exciting names. I had so much fun because, like, I think I've mentioned in my other dynasty, Maddie and I just like went for win now right from the start. We traded away like so many of our picks. We just had, and we made terrible picks in the prospect draft. I did a show with Victor like a couple of years ago. We went back over the prospect draft we did. It's just like we took all the players who we thought would help us win in year one, and they were like terrible picks, like John Marino in the first round, who was still prospects eligible. It's like, what are we thinking when you look at the guys we could have taken? But anyway, that's water on the bridge. All that to say, I was really excited to just have this list of like actual, like Brian and I could have like prospects, like good prospects that people would want. You know, like also in my other league, oftentimes people are like, oh, I've got, I'm putting Sam Reinhart on the trade block or something, and I'm looking to like, to get some good young players, and then I'd like message the manager and be like, oh, I'm interested in Sam Reinhart. Like, who do you want? And they look at my team like, you don't really have any prospects that I want, which is so heartbreaking. So now it's nice that we have some of these guys. But yeah, so at this point in the draft, there were still a bunch, but obviously they're going off our queue quickly. But yeah, so after Zellweger, then the next picks are a goalie from Freeway Faceoff who traded for this pick, and they took Ivan Fedotov, who is one of the rare guys in this prospects draft, I guess along with Brock Faber, who has like a pretty big contract already. Not as big as Faber, but 3.25 mil for, I guess, one more season with Philly. So he's one of these guys that came from the KHL. He's really tall. I know that about him. So we'll see. Obviously, great opportunity for Fedotov to potentially be a starting goalie as soon as this coming season, right? It's going to be him or Ersson, I imagine. Then a couple defensemen, Yakimchuk and Kevin Korchinski. Then Jonathan Lekaramaki, Tej Iginla, son of Jerome. Maverick Bork, Dallas, just all these like late picks. You talked about Stankoven, who was taken in the first round. Like Maverick Bork is a guy who tore up the AHL last year. It's like, what an exciting team. And of course, Brian and I are very excited to have Wyatt Johnston, who we took in the second round of the pro draft, as we discussed last week. Then Cole Iserman, who was drafted by the Islanders this draft and is apparently a great goal scorer. Then Joel Hofer, another goalie. And this is a guy, obviously, who's going to help you win now. Connor Zary, Simon Edvinsson, Frank Nazar from Chicago, then Easton Cowan from the Leafs, and then it came back to Brian and my pick, and we took Danila Yurov from Minnesota. And we were deciding between a bunch of guys. I'm pretty sure one of the other guys we were looking at is the guy who ended up going the very next pick, Matthew Savoy, which I feel like is always just one of those, like you're deciding between two people, then as soon as you make your pick, like a second later, the other guy that you wanted, that feeling like, oh no, did I just make a huge mistake? But yeah, Edmonton obviously traded for Savoy, and we'll see like if he gets like a prime roster spot with a McDavid or a Draisaitl. But in the meantime, the thing I liked about Yurov is, like Brian said, I just like these guys who he's already been doing really well in the KHL, which is like kind of like a league like the NHL, right? Like maybe not to the exact same level, but it's not like these guys who put up like insane numbers, like you said, Zellweger taking 12 shots a game in whatever, the WHL. Like this is like a league where it's hard to get a lot of points, and Yurov has been doing well. And I read some interviews. I read like for all these prospects, I just go on Twitter, just like search their name and read like everything I can about these people. And like Yurov has like been talking. There's some athletic articles about him where he's like so excited to play with Kaprizov, and like he like idolizes him, and like that's his like dream or whatever to come. So it's not like one of these guys we have to worry he's not going to come over. So I'm really hoping that Danila Yurov, comes over to the NHL, not next season. I think he's still under contract, maybe in 2 seasons. And then it could be like him, Kaprizov, Boldy, line 1. I'll take that. But we'll see. So yeah, that's the first half and a bit of round 3, as per Brian's request. Unless Brian, do you want to say anything about Yurov? Okay, Brian. All right. So Jeremy, what do you think about all of these picks up to our Yurov pick?
I really like the Joel Hofer pick. That's a guy who probably will be playing a lot of games soon. Pretty highly rated prospect. I think he's going to be a good goalie. I also liked the Maverick Bork pick. I think because Stankoven's been so good, people have kind of forgotten about Maverick Bork, but he was over a point per game in the AHL last year as, I think, a 20-year-old. And he's a center, so I think he's going to be a bit more involved in, the future success of the team. Like, I think they're going to try to build around him and complement his skill set. Actually, we were talking earlier about guys who might be good in fantasy and not so good in real life. I think that may be Cole Iserman. I've seen people projecting him as a future 50 goal scorer, which is a very bold projection for someone who also has some serious flaws in their game.
Right.
But I would not be surprised if he ends up being one of those guys who's going to score 35 or 40 goals a year and kind of not be like a star on his team just because he's performing well for fantasy, but is more like a second liner or a second tier guy. But I do like the pick for fantasy. I think it's great upside. And, if he does iron out the second half of his game, he could be a phenomenal player.
Maybe he can follow in the footsteps of like a Jeff Skinner, be like a 40 goal scorer who gets bought out of his contract a couple years later, or like a Jacob Verana, who was a good goal scorer but couldn't put it together. Like I guess for other parts of it, Verana just got a PTO with Washington back where it started, so that'll be fun to see. But yeah, so we'll see if Cole Eiserman could hopefully. Well, I guess it's hard to say like hopefully do better than like Jeff Skinner, who's actually had like a really like solid career overall. He's played now over 1,000 games. But a sad end, obviously, to get bought out, especially coming off a year where you scored 24 goals. But whatever, that's not what we're talking about here. So, yeah, I agree. It's a really exciting pick. I definitely would have considered Eiserman if he would have fallen to our 13th overall pick in that third round. Brian, any funny names? I shouldn't say funny names, right? That's rude. How do you classify when you're making fun of people's names? Sorry, not making fun. When you're commenting on people's names, what do you call it?
So hard. I just say good names.
Good names.
Good names.
Okay.
No,
all right.
It's easier to no. I think. Thank you though. Please keep throwing to me for when we get to the good names.
Okay. All right. So next up, like I said, Matt Savoy went, then Oliver Moore, who I know a lot of people are really high on in Chicago. Chicago's going to be really fun sometime soon. Like probably not next year, but I think they'll be a little fun next year. Anytime they have Bedard, they're going to be fun. But I know Oliver Moore is a guy that a lot of people are excited about. Then Silayev, another one of these New Jersey defensemen that make me concerned about like a Nemec, just because like there's so many people that are going to be fighting for ice time on that New Jersey D. But Silayev just went 10th overall in this recent draft. Then Matt Coronado, one of these guys who, like Jeremy said, has already like established himself as an NHLer, and it's just a matter of like seeing what his upside can be. Then Bradley Nadeau. Then 3 goalies in a row to end this round and start the following round in Jacob Fowler, Justus Annunen. We've been corrected many times not to call him Justice. It's Justus. And then Sebastian Casa, one half of the 2 of Red Wings goalie prospects that people are really excited about. So Jeremy, I'll throw it to you, I guess, then for this round of picks. A lot of fun names. Not funny names, just fun names.
Just fun names. I do think it's going to be really interesting how the 2 Detroit goalies play out. Like, they've got 2 of arguably the top 5 or so goalie prospects right now. So, who's going to win? Like,
Well, I actually point out that the team that took Casa, Rambling Unicorns, they traded for this pick, and they also traded for their next pick, which happened 7 picks later, and they took Trey Augustine. So they got the pair. So just like you said, you're excited about us having the Sharks pair. I'll throw it out to Rambling Unicorns. If you want to swap, we'll trade our 2 Sharks for your 2 Red Wings if you're interested.
Sounds like a great deal.
I think it's pretty reasonable.
I'm sure they'll be reaching out to you shortly for that.
2 up-and-coming teams.
Not to continue on goalies because I'm actually not a big goalie guy when it comes to prospects. I do not watch tape on goalies. I do not understand how to evaluate a goalie. So it's purely like me reading things. But I really like Jacob Fowler too. Just
That's
the
what I've
numbers
heard.
he's put up as young as he did are really good. So I like Jacob Fowler. And then to talk about your pick, I actually still have pretty high hopes, both for Rutger McGroarty, who you took, and
I didn't mention him yet. We didn't take him
him?
still for a little while. You're getting ahead of us here.
Well,
My last pick that I talked about was a Yurov.
Oh, okay. So I must have skipped ahead because.
But I'm excited that you like Rutger McGroarty. We'll get to him soon. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
I
good
just
name.
went into the third round and started scanning, or is that the third round or the fourth round?
The 4th round. Yeah,
The
round 30
fourth round.
overall. Yeah, I only went
Yes.
up to Sebastian Casa to start round 4. But
Gotcha.
I'll throw some more names at you now. The 4th round of the Dynasty draft. Maybe I'll just go through this whole round now that we're getting away from like the top tier guys, and then after that we'll go to 2 and we'll expand. Should I take a break? Let's take a break. I should have thrown in an ad break at some point, but whatever. It's the summer. You're listening to Keeping Karlsson. We'll be back soon. Welcome back. We are about to talk about the fourth round of this prospects draft we did. So we're talking picks 80 and beyond. So like I said, Sebastian Cossa started off the round. Then we get a couple more defensemen, Denton Mateychuk, Gulyayev from Colorado. Then Artur Silovs, another goalie from Vancouver. Then Christian Helenius, who was taken in this most recent draft. Sorry, Consta. Very rude. It's like a quiz kind of now, because Fantrax, at least the view I'm looking at, is just shows a first initial and a last name, and I've been testing myself, but I blew this one. But yeah, Helenius is a Buffalo. Just drafts a bunch of these guys. Like, how many Buffalo like middle six wingers have I mentioned in this draft? I feel like Kulich. I don't know. They have a bunch of guys like this. That it'll be interesting. Zach Benson. Like, we'll see like who ends up actually establishing themselves. I hope it's Krebs. Like, if Peyton Krebs will end up being better than all these guys, I hope. Okay. Then a defenseman, Axin Sandin Pelika, Snuggerud from St. Louis, Trey Augustine, Furcus from Seattle. Oh, so I'm sure Jeremy has thoughts on Jagger Furcus, which is a fun name, by the way. Is it Jagger or Jagger?
Got to be Jagger.
It's Jagger.
That's pretty cool. Okay. Pretty cool name right there. Quentin Musty. Brian, that's an interesting name, Musty. You got like a name that's sort of also an adjective.
It's definitely on my good. Yeah, it's almost like maybe the game is you try and figure out who.
I have to guess who Jeremy likes as prospects and who Brian likes as names.
Jimmy Snuggerud. You just whipped right past.
I apologize.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
And then I guess I'll get to our pick. So I will say at this point in the draft, we had traded our pick. The pick that was taken where Trey Augustine was taken, that was originally Brian and my pick, but we had traded back in this round, back when we were in the pro draft, and we traded up a pick to get, I know this gets a little confusing, but we traded up a pick in order to take the Florida centerman, I have totally blank. Oh yeah, to take Anton Lundell, who I thought was like probably not going to fall to our following pick at that point. So we traded back in this round of the prospects draft in exchange for trading up in that round of the pro draft. So we got Lundell, and that's what got these guys Augustine, assuming that he wasn't going to fall anyways. But then a couple picks later, I started regretting it and feeling like, oh man, there's like a guy here who I really want that I feel like is definitely not going to fall to our following pick. So we traded then a future pick from this round to get Rutger McGroarty, who Jeremy's already mentioned a couple of times. So I'm excited for you to tell me how awesome that decision was to get McGroarty, because I thought that at this point that was a big teardrop after him to the next group of prospects. I really wanted to get Rutger, even though I know he's currently upset with Winnipeg. It's fun. Brian and I have Askarov, who's upset with Nashville. We've got McGroarty, who's upset with Winnipeg. So we've got Team Disgruntled over here for any Curb fans. But okay, so Jeremy, that's a bunch of names. Do you want to comment on anyone between Mateychuk and McGroarty? I guess I said I'd go through the round, but now I've already thrown to you.
Yeah, no, I just still believe in McGroarty as a player. I think the contract dispute is kind of rough, or the whatever disgruntledness is going on. But I do think he's a talented player that once this all gets shorted out, I'm excited to see what he can do on the ice.
Okay, so then to finish off this round, so next was Brad Lambert, who I remember last year, like he fell pretty far. Like he was someone who originally, here's my prospect knowledge. Are you ready, Jeremy? Brad Lambert was originally expected to be one of the top picks in 2022, like before, like, a year before that. And then he had a really bad year leading into his draft year, and he fell all the way to pick 30. But then apparently he's really like shown that actually, no, he is good in the minors for Winnipeg. So now I think people are back on to Brad Lambert and now thinking Winnipeg got a steal, taking 30th overall. So that's my Brad Lambert story, and he goes to D. Costi. Then Dvorsky went. Then Paraskak, another 2024 guy. Daniil Tarasov, a goalie. By the way, I should mention that another strategy here that you have to think about is like, so Daniil Tarasov has played 45 games. The team that took him, like, he's going to lose his minors eligibility very soon going to next season. So that might be fine. Or, that could be a reason why some of these guys fell a little bit, because, especially with the 4 max pro goalies, that means that if the team that took Tarasov, if they already had 4 pro goalies, they'd have to now be considering how they're going to have to drop one of their pro goalies, like, or their roster will be locked and it'll be illegal because Tarasov won't be minors eligible anymore. But anyways, I know that all that says that's negative. Like, I think Tarasov has the potential to steal the job this year. I think he already kind of did steal the job for stretches last year over Merzlikins. It's kind of a mess there in the Columbus net. But yeah, okay. So then finishing off that round, like I said, so Tarasov, then Connor Geeky, who's someone I was very interested in. I definitely would have taken him with the next pick if he had fallen, but I guess obviously he got traded to Tampa Bay, becomes their top prospect because Tampa, like my other dynasty team, just trades away all their high picks all the time. But apparently Geeky also hits and also has some offensive upside, so I'm interested in him. Then, okay, Simashev, Andrew Cristal, David Reinbacher, and then the round ended with I blew it. I'm going to edit point. Ended with Trevor Connolly, the somewhat controversial pick that went to Vegas in this most recent draft. So, Jeremy, that concludes round 4. What do you think?
Similar to McGroarty, I still kind of like Brad Lambert. I think he's shown a bit more in the AHL that, he definitely lost draft stock. Like, he was in talks for potential top 5 pick and fell all the way to the end of the first round. But I do think he's kind of shown a more mature game and maybe doesn't have the ceiling he did before, but it's a good pick. I like Andrew Cristal for Washington too, is like just a good opportunity there if he really starts showing stuff to get called up quickly and make an impact.
Yeah, there's a guy who Anaheim drafted last year named Niko Mijatovic, and it was like if you fast forward to like the last round, like that we've been like round 51 of overall. So what does that make it? Like whatever 30 something the prospect draft. Like it's all nobodies, and this guy was still out there. The reason why I'm talking about him is he was drafted last year 33rd overall by Anaheim, and so I started seeing him as like someone that maybe I need to consider drafting at this point. And I started reading tweets. I searched Twitter for Mijatovic, and it's all just angry Ducks fans being like, "Why did you take Mijatovic when you could have taken Andrew Cristal? This is the worst pick." And then people being like, super hyperbole. Like, this is going to go down as the worst pick in Ducks history. It's like Cristal and also a guy from Carolina who's really good. I have to go get that 2023 draft results. But it was like they took this guy Mijatovic, who looks like a big nobody, and they passed on 2 guys who people are now thinking are going to like turn into like really good players. Let me just get that here for you. Gavin Brindley. Oh, so not Carolina Columbus, but yeah, apparently people are really high on him as well. So that's a shame, but yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of good things about Cristal. Brian, any funny names? Cristal's kind of a fun name, isn't that the name for like a fancy vodka or something?
Yeah,
like some alcohol.
It's a pretty good name. Like it doesn't quite cross the threshold on my list, but I appreciate you mentioning it. Like it's candidacy. It's like a nominee, but didn't win.
Okay, let's go through the next round now, and I'll stop at our pick. Jonathan Berggren, or I think it's like not Jonathan, it's Jonathan. What do you think, Brian, about a Jonathan? That's kind of a fun. It's like when people nowadays, like a 2024, and you're naming your kid, and you want to like put a little twist on it to like sound original, even though it's a general name. I feel like a lot of people do stuff like that, but this is probably just someone from a different country.
I think this is just like Scandinavian. Yeah, I don't think anyone's trying to stand out here.
That also happens a lot on like Game of Thrones, like this latest show, like House of the Dragon. A lot of the people have like regular names, but they're spelled in really ridiculous ways. Not to say that Jonathan Berggren is spelled a ridiculous way, but some of these Game of Thrones names are pretty silly. But okay, so Dylan Holloway. Oh, that's fun. I wonder if Dusty and PJ and Maddie, who took Dylan Holloway, are happy or sad about the potential of him going to St. Louis, which I think now, to me, I'm just going to guess right now, I'm throwing it out there. I think that Edmonton is going to retain Broberg and let Holloway walk just because they made that Podkolzin trade. So it's like, they're like, fine, take Holloway. We'll get Podkolzin and he's cheaper. What do you think, Jeremy? Is that how you see it, or how do you think this is going to turn out?
I don't think they keep Broberg unless they trade CC or Kulak. And I heard that they were being asked for a first-round pick to cap dump CC or Kulak, and I don't think they're going to do that. I actually think they let both walk.
Interesting. Okay, I mean, if you're a team that's going for it now, like Edmonton has to be, I feel like you probably should let them walk. It's probably just annoying to like let them walk and get like barely anything for them, a second and a third, when they could have traded them and gotten so much more. But I guess that's what you get for waiting and not signing your free agents. But anyways, so Berggren, Holloway. Then we're continuing this 5th round of the prospects draft. Riley Heidt, who I remember messaging the team that drafted him and said, like, just as long as he doesn't take Yurov's spot, like I already said, I want it to be Kaprizov, Boldy, and Yurov. That's the top line. So Haidit can be a solid second liner. I'm fine with that. Josh Roy, Brian, anything to like the Habs having a last name Roy or Roy, who is apparently a very high pedigree, exciting prospect. That's fun, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, unless it's a goalie, though, I think it's totally different. Or a
But just
number
so Habs
33.
jersey, a
Do they
Habs
retire?
jersey,
Is his
they
number
probably
retired? Yeah, it must
has to be,
right?
right?
Yeah.
You'd think so. When you think
I'm gonna-
Habs,
I'll look that up while you and Jeremy continue
okay.
your
But
analysis.
speaking of goalies, Drew Comesso, who I definitely remember Brian and I looking at. This is a point where, by the way, coming into this next group of picks, Brian and I were thinking like we're going to try to get our next goalie. Because if you recall, we currently have so Jeff Skinner, Vasilevsky, two Sharks that might turn out to be nothing, and then we got Askarov as our first prospect goalie. But I really wanted to get a second solid prospect goalie, so I remember being a bit disappointed when Drew Comesso went, because at this point, by the way, my like you said, Jeremy, like my research for goalie prospects is just Googling and searching for all the various rankings of different people saying their lists of goalie prospects and just trying to aggregate and see. And like Comesso was high on a bunch of them, and Chicago obviously is this team that's going to be super exciting in a little while. So he definitely was on my mind. I know they also have this guy Gajan. And so, maybe it's a little bit like the Detroit situation where it's hard to know who it's going to be. But anyway, I would have liked Comesso, but he went to the meme team. Then Joaquim Kemel. I like the name Joaquim. Just throw it out there. But I know that's not going to count for Brian. He's looking for a really special name. Mad Sogard. I remember after Mad Sogard got drafted, Brian messaged me and was like, "Oh, Mad Sogard was still around. Oh, I wanted him." And it's like, yeah, he's apparently going to be the future. But now he's blocked, right? Well, I guess we'll see. Ottawa has Allmark for 1 year, and we'll see if they extend him or not. But Sogard's had his chances with Ottawa, and he hasn't been that great. But I know he's still, like, a lot of people see him as a high pedigree prospect. Anyways, I'm blabbing, but I guess I'm taking my time and Brian's time, so it's okay now. Then a team called the Jager Bombs, who were originally spelled Jagr, drafted Braden Yager, who is also a Penguins player. And then they changed their spelling of their team name to Jager Bomb, spelled like Braden Yager. So that's fun. All right. Then Scott Morrow. Then it was our pick. And Brian and I took Callum Ritchie, who on that same article by Craig Button that ranked Nikishin really high, he also had Callum Ritchie really high. And Ritchie is someone who I was co-managing a team with Victor Nuno last year. And he was telling me how Callum Ritchie's really good and how no one knows it because he was injured a lot in his draft year. And so that's why he fell in his draft. Callum Ritchie ended up going, well, so it's to Colorado. So you have to expect it's going to be pretty far down. Yeah, 27th overall in 2023. But now Callum Ritchie got to actually play a full season this past year in the minors, and he was apparently like really great. And people are expecting him to be on like Team Canada in the World Juniors. And yes, we had 80 points in 50 games last year with Oshawa. And I know like with the OHL, it's like everyone gets 80 points in 50 games, but he's someone that I'm super stoked about. Apparently has high upside, and Colorado doesn't have many prospects, so it's nice that he jumps to like the top of their prospect pool. Maybe I'll stop here. What do you think, Jeremy? Any names from, I guess, where were we here? From, sorry, edit point. From Berggren to Callum Ritchie that interest you and want to compliment the Callum Ritchie pick?
I do like the Callum Ritchie pick. That was a name that actually I wasn't really knowledgeable about until again this year. I've started hearing rumblings. Oh yeah, he's been really good this year. He's finally staying healthy. Like, look what he's doing in the OHL. I do like that one. I like the Kamel pick. He put up really good numbers in the AHL as a 19-year-old, I think. So that's always really promising to see someone playing above their age group and putting up points. I also really liked the Riley Height pick, and I have to say, Kaprizov, Yurov, and Boldy are not going to be aligned because none of them are a center.
No, I think Yurov is a center. Or
Is
he's
he?
on
I thought he was a winger.
Fantrax.
I thought he was a winger.
Well, I don't
Maybe.
know. I hope you're wrong. Oh, yeah, you're right. It does say left wing, right wing. I thought I read that he could be a. Well, that doesn't work out well for me then. You're right. That's going to be
Maybe
hard.
that's one of those where he's like trying to transition over. Like, he was playing in the KHL last year, so he's probably low on priority for playing center. But yeah, if they do try to convert him, yeah, he could be a first line center.
All
But
right,
yeah, I
so
do like
fine.
Riley Heidt. Riley Height's just put up stupid amount of points in the WHL. I think he's put up over 100 points 2 years in a row. There are some concerns about how his game translates, if he may just be kind of a second to third line energy guy, and the scoring talent may not be NHL quality. But I think he's a sure thing to at least play some meaningful NHL games. And at that point in the prospect draft, you want that with the upside to be a really good producer also.
Okay, all right, so I can see that turning into a really good pick. All right, how about this? Yurov, Kaprizov, Boldy, Height could be on power play 1 with either Faber or Buim. Though I don't know what that does to Joel Eriksson-Ek, but I'm talking 2-3 years down the road. So hopefully by then Eriksson-Ek doesn't need that spot anymore. Okay, so I didn't mention that when we took Callum Ritchie, we actually had another pick coming up in 3 picks after that. So like Brian and I were planning on taking a goalie with one of those picks. And I think at the time that we took Callum Ritchie, we were debating between Eric Portillo, who's a Kings prospect, and then this guy, Michael Harabel, who is a Utah prospect. And Portillo was like been playing in the AHL and could even get in the NHL as soon as next season, like if Riddick stinks or gets injured, or obviously if Kemper gets injured. And Harabel is someone who is only 19, but he's like super tall and apparently looks really good. But it might be like, like 5 years before we see him in the NHL. You know how these goalies are when they're only 19. Then it came to, so then after the Callum Ritchie pick, Portillo went like right after. So I was like, oh, maybe we blew it here. Maybe we should have just taken Portillo. Because I think Brian and I at the time were like, we'll just take whoever of Portillo or Harabel with the following pick. So we don't need to like decide now. But then Portillo went, and I was like, I think I made a great mistake. But I think we're fine. Because then Pelletier went, the Calgary forward who's already played a bunch of games. He's played 37 games now last season, or 13 last season, 24 the year before. Then it came to our pick. And then I was like close to picking Harabel, but then I started looking into some other potential options. And if you recall, Brian, and I think we even messaged Jeremy about this, and we were like talking about other potential goalies. And then there's this guy that jumped out at me who was just drafted in the 2024 draft, this draft that just happened, Ilya Nabokov, who apparently, just like Nikishin, like did really well last year in the KHL. And like originally I had skipped over him because like, oh, a goalie drafted in 2024, he's not going to be in the NHL now till like 2029. Like I don't want to wait that long. But then I realized, no, Nabokov is a guy who just went undrafted for a couple years, so he just was able to still be drafted, and he's already 21 years old, and apparently he's going to play like one more year in the KHL, then come to the AHL. He was drafted by Colorado. I think Colorado really could use another good goalie prospect because they basically just have Justus Annunen. Like there's one more year left of Georgiev on his contract, and then we'll see if they retain him or whatever. But I think there's a really good chance that come like a year or two from now, Nabokov could be challenging as the starter, or maybe sharing starts with Annunen over in Colorado. So all of a sudden I got excited about him. He was the playoff MVP apparently and KHL Rookie of the Year this past season. So Brian knows me. This is the third example now in this draft, and maybe fourth, depending on what you want to call Askarov. But yeah, I was like, you know what? Forget Harabel. Let's take Nabokov. Even if I think Harabel might be better one day, I don't want to wait. Like Brian and I don't plan on competing this year, but we do plan on competing in like 2 years, or 3 years. And I feel like Harabel might still be in the minors at that point. So I was stoked about that pick. Brian, any memories of us jumping on Nabokov here? Aside from you could talk about how there's another goalie in the NHL who was named Nabokov before, apparently not related.
No.
Okay.
Sorry. That's
fine. All right, so let me continue with the rest of the picks for this round.
It seemed, I remember you feeling like Harabel was going to last longer than he did. Like he was taken. Like we thought he'd be available.
I think that was
to
Portillo.
us.
I think Portillo I thought would fall. Harabel, I just was like at that point I was like, I'm over him. Like I was into him.
You moved
and then
on
I like
quick.
fell out of love.
He's. I mean, the thing is that if you're drafting a 19-year-old goalie, like you're so far from seeing anything from him. Like it's almost irrelevant. Like who knows where. I mean, I was going to say our teams, or I mean, this is the Keeping Karlsson Dynasty League, so this one lasts. So we know the league will be around the world around us. Like, I don't know. There's so many things that could happen to a 19-year-old prospect between now and the goalie prospect between now and the time he can contribute. So you're basically buying a lottery ticket that you can only actually check the results on in like 5 to 6 years, and even then you might still only be getting a partial picture. Like we were talking about Lucas Dostal on the last show, right? And it's like, well, I wonder what's going to happen to him, like how good he'll be.
And he's 24.
He's 24, right? And we're still like, this year might not even tell us, like if he does really well or badly. Like 1 year's not going to tell us anything. Let's say he has 2 years of results and then he moves or something moves around him, then it's like all bets are off. Anyway, it's just a goalie prospect in a dynasty draft. I feel like a 19-year-old is just so far away.
Yeah,
unless
so I'm
they're locked in like a blue chip. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I'm excited that we have Askarov, who's 22, but like obviously also like a top-rated guy, and Nabokov, who's 21. We'll see. He could be nothing. He just basically had one really good year, but goalies maybe take some. I don't know. I don't know anything about him except that he had a really good year last year, and I'm excited to see. And I think there's a good opportunity in Colorado. But anyways, to finish off this round, so Hrabal went next. Then Ivan Miroshnichenko, who I believe was like considered a really high-end Washington prospect. He goes pretty far in this draft. Leonard is long gone. Cristal was taken. I guess Miroshnichenko. Like people talk about Washington kind of not having anybody, but all of a sudden it's like, okay, I guess they have some decent prospects here. He played actually a bit last year. Played 21 games, only 6 points, 50 hits though. So that's pretty good. If you're gonna get a guy with offensive upside who also hits a lot. Oh, Washington has some people like that. Tom Wilson, right? Okay. Then Brandseg Nygaard, Michael Brandseg Nygaard. Detroit took him just this year. He apparently is like, I saw one tweet, I think it was Cam Robinson, who said him, Marco Casper, and Nate Danielson are like all the same player. And so it's like funny that Detroit keeps taking this guy. Okay, then finish off the round. So Karlsson Rekhoff from Jeremy's Seattle Kraken. Then Lucas Reichel, who at one point would have gone a lot earlier, but I guess he's been a little disappointing in his shots in the NHL so far. Then Ridley Gregg and Martin Pospisil. So we end this round with 3 guys who have played a bunch of NHL games at this point. Jeremy, thoughts on this round 31, which is round 5 of the prospects draft?
I do like the Karlsson Rekhoff pick. Like he's one of those guys in Seattle that I have high hopes for being a first or second line winger in the future. Him and Jagger Firkus probably are competing for that, top sniper type of role going forward. That was kind of the big guy that jumped out at me there. Again, kind of sticking with high upside guys is kind of where the entire draft is going. Miroshnichenko is interesting in Washington. He didn't have a great year last year in the small sample of games he played, but I think he's got a lot of talent and could improve a lot in the coming years.
Interesting. Okay, so let's move on now to the following round here, where not having. Okay, Brian, I hope we're gonna get some fun names here because we're still kind of waiting on one to jump out, but I guess we'll see how this round does. Pospisil's kind of fun.
Yeah, Ridley Gregg, to be honest, is a pretty good name. We're all a little
really?
like decent. I think, yeah, Ridley Gregg.
Sounds kind of basic to me.
Okay, all right.
Well, what about it?
I mean, we're free to disagree.
Why just sell me on it, please?
The thing is, like, some names just have it. You can't you can't sell. I think we might just be desensitized to Ridley Gregg because like there was a lot of discourse about him after the
Josh North Shane Pinto stuff.
No, wasn't he was it him or Parker Kelly? Who was it? I confuse them.
That
often.
did what?
The Morgan the empty net slap shot.
Oh. No, yeah, that was Ridley Gregg.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. I know what you're talking about. So.
I think, okay, so because of the discourse, maybe you can add that. Because of the discourse on Ridley Gregg's, empty net slap shot against Toronto, I feel like we're just desensitized to it. Schwab Squad in the chat is saying Elon knows many Ridleys confirmed. Like, he's a okay, all right. I'm surprised you don't see it.
I guess I'm thinking, like, I know Ridley from Alien. You're right. I don't know why it did. I guess Ridley, you're right, is a pretty cool name. I guess I've been thinking last names. I didn't realize that first names were kind of like part of this.
It can be a combo, of both. Ridley Gregg is like, it's like you're talking, neither one is spelled the way you'd imagine. And it's like you're talking about a guy named Greg who's Ridley. He loves riddles.
Matt also
or
said
he
in the
is
chat,
a riddle.
When we talked about Mad Sogard, he wrote Mad Sogard more like Bads No Guards. Keep those coming. That's fun.
I'm surprised you're giving me this much runway, by the way, for hockey name discussion.
This is
You are-
August
You-
18th. Next episode's going to be serious. I think our next episode is our goalie rankings. There we don't have
Why
time to
did
make
we
fun.
start by saying that? We probably should have mentioned that at the beginning.
Look, we're not good at this. We're good at making podcasts. I think we're fine at it, but we're not great at promoting. That's why we need someone to sign us to an offer sheet, and then kind of take our career over for us. You pay us money and you run the show, and you just tell us, don't forget to promote this thing at the start of the show. All right, just tell me. I'll do it. I'll do anything. I don't know. Yeah, we probably should have promoted a lot of things, but we didn't. I promoted Dauber Hockey. We don't even make any money off of that. Why did we do that?
Okay, don't complain about that. I can tell you why we do it, because we're friends. We've been friends with Dauber for almost 15 years now, and we bump each other's work because we mean it.
Of course. Okay.
But now we're gonna get an angry phone call tomorrow, canceling the relationship.
What?
And you'll have to beg for it back.
I will beg. I like that relationship. We don't have that many relationships. Okay. So, by the way, Pospisil, I think, is a fun pick here for a team trying to win now. He last year was so insane for hits. Do you realize, Brian, he had 238 hits in his 63 games, and along with 24 points, so nothing offensively, over almost 2 shots per game, and then an insane number of hits. And that's for a guy who's 24 years old. Got him in a swing spot. If you're trying to win right now, I'd love to. I wish I had Pospisil in my other league for this season where I'm trying to contend. For this league, I was okay to let him go, just because who knows in 3 years if he'll still be in the league and what'll be going on. But definitely, I like him for if you're trying to win now. But okay, let's continue. So the next round started. I'm just gonna read through the whole round. I guess I'll stop on my pick because self-centered like that. So Josh Doan started off the round, son of Shane. Then Noah Ostland, another one of these Buffalo guys, add him to the list of guys who could play in Buffalo's middle six. Cole Hudson. Is he related to Lane Hudson? I believe so. Yes. He's younger brother. So taken by Washington in the most recent draft. Gavin Brindley, the guy I was talking about that Anaheim could have taken, but instead they took Mijatovic last year. Then we get to Pavel Dorofeyev from Vegas, who's already played a bunch of games. He's played 67 games now. Akil Thomas. I remember when he got taken, a few people in the group chat were upset about it. They was calling him Akil the real deal. So apparently he's got a following. He's played 7 games so far, 4 points. Not bad for his short start in the NHL. All right, then we got Matthew Wood. Then it was our pick, Brian. And I think this is around the time, I recall. I think before that you were still pretty engaged with me. But yeah, this is around the part where you were just go for it. And yeah, I went with Colby Barlow. I remember at the time I was thinking of a few guys, maybe one sec. A few guys I'll actually forget it. At some point, I remember at this point, there were a few guys I liked, but what I liked about Colby Barlow was, first of all, I saw an article by the Winnipeg beat writer. Brian, what's the name of the Winnipeg beat writer who I interviewed a couple times? He was so great.
Murat
Atesh, and he had an article projecting the Jets lines 2 years down the road, and he was expecting that Barlow will be second line center at that point, and also apparently he hits a lot, so that seemed like a prospect that I'd be interested in having if we can at this point in the draft, as the names are starting to become less and less likely to be huge impact guys. I like the idea of just a guy that can be a top sixer that hits. That sold it for me, so I took Barlow. So I'll be curious to see now if Jeremy thinks someone who was taken in the rest of this round is someone I should have taken. I know another one of the guys I was really considering was Nate Danielson, and also actually Marco Kasper, who we ended up getting 2 rounds later. So clearly we didn't need to reach for Marco Kasper. So after Barlow, then a couple 3 defensemen in a row: Behrens from Colorado, then Makamadulin from San Jose, Tom Willander from Vancouver, then Nate Danielson went as the next forward. And then that obviously caused me to think did I blow it? Should I have taken him instead of Barlow? Jeremy will decide. Then Liam Ogren from Minnesota, a goalie from Toronto, Dennis Hilbity. I've seen him on a lot of rankings of top 20 prospect goalies. We'll see. Chernyshov from San Jose, Voronkov from
Hildeby.
What did I say?
Hilbity.
Oh, my mistake. Sorry.
Beverly Hillbitties.
Good. That's a team name right there. Chernyshov, Voronkov, Maki Samoskevich. That's a fun name. I know his real name is Matthew, but I think people call him Mackie. Okay. Nico Dawes, Seamus Casey. Remember the wrestler Sheamus, Brian?
I know the
It's like
wrestler
really pale.
Sheamus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Luca Cagoni, ended the
Cagnoni.
round. Cagnoni. So yeah, Jeremy, what do you think about the Barlow pick? Who else do you like from this round that I should have taken instead of Colby Barlow here?
Barlow and Danielson, I think, are kind of neck and neck. Like, I think that's down to personal preference. I like both of them, and I think they have similar upside. The big thing I noticed this round is the amount of picks with like true top line or top pairing upside really faded out. Like, it's a lot of like middle six type targets. It was like just a big gap between this round and the previous two, I feel. This is kind of where it started getting into the dregs of prospecting, I think. I really liked the Luca Cagnoni pick at the end. He came out of nowhere and went off in I think the OHL last year. So there's a lot of offensive upside there. I also like Cole Hudson, is very similar to his brother Lane, has a ton of offensive upside, and Washington is a great place to realize that, given the rest of their prospect defensemen are not the offensive QB type players.
Yeah, I know Washington has a lot of big guys like your Ryan Chesleys that might be NHLers but won't be so good for fantasy. Yeah, Luca Cagnoni, 90 points in 65 games last year in the WHL as a defenseman. That's pretty wild. And yeah, San Jose seems like a place where, I mean, no, I know they took this guy Dickinson in the most recent draft, so I imagine he's the front runner for like 3 years down the road. But obviously, they're like, it could be this guy that ends up QBing the top power play with Celebrini and Will Smith and like all these like really exciting guys, Eklund. So yeah, that's definitely a spot. It's kind of like with Anaheim, how Brian, you were saying like we really want to get that Anaheim QB. I feel like if you could get that San Jose QB for a couple of years from now, that'll be good. I guess also people are going for the Chicago one, and it's just a matter of it's tricky to figure out sometimes who that player is going to be. It's not like a Nikishin situation where it's clear and obvious that we just have the guy and there's no other competition. I'm being a little sarcastic. Okay, next round we've got Michael Hage, who I know Habs fans are excited about. They got him at the end of the first round of this draft. Oh, Brian, come on, you're gonna like Daniel Boot. His name is just B-U-T.
It's a pretty good name. Daniil, yeah, that's a very good name. Like, especially if he ends up playing anywhere. Like if he plays in Montreal, that would be amazing. Imagine like having a guy who's the back of his jersey says goal. That would be like a Boot playing in BUT.
Nice.
Yeah.
You took it to a classy place. Yeah, he was a 12th overall pick actually last year. So that's a really good. He was someone also I was deciding between when I was looking at Colby Barlow, and honestly, I really just I can't even remember like what like I feel like they both could end up being really good. Like I think Boot is someone who's done well in Russia. Maybe at this point, like I just knew Brian was going to make fun of me if I wanted more KHL guys. So at this point, I was like, maybe I need to take a Canadian, someone playing in Canada or the U.S. Okay. Then the other Chicago goalie that I was talking about that's going to compete with Comesso, Gajan, finally went, Adam Gajan. Then Matthew Poitras from Boston, who I believe is like one of their top prospects, but also that's kind of like damning with faint praise because Boston doesn't have any prospects. Ty Cardi is a guy that people would know in leagues that count hits. So we'll see. I don't think there's any offensive upside there. Jeremy, you can correct me as the Kraken fan. Are you excited for Cardi beyond being a fourth line? Cardi B. Oh, Cardi B could be a team name.
Well, it would work if it was
Playboy
Cardi, but it's Cartier.
Cartier.
Cartier is the pronunciation. I don't think there's a ton of upside there. I think he's a cool story because he was undrafted and we signed him and he made the team and like played a bunch of games. So that's kind of cool, but I don't think there's first line or first power play upside there now.
Matthew is saying that he's surprised that Poitras went real late. Does that jump out to you also as a really great pick here so late?
Kind of, yeah, because like, yeah, he wasn't that impressive in his NHL minutes last year, but he also was 18 years old. So he's a leg up on all the guys who haven't even played in the NHL and are 18 years old. So there's still room to grow for him there also. I'm not sure the skill set is, 90 to 100 point elite type skill set, but I do think he's got some first line upside and has already shown that he's capable of playing in the NHL, so he can continue growing there instead of in a lower league.
Yeah, he was 19 last year. He's 20 now since March, but yeah, 15 points in 33 games, which isn't so bad for a first stint of a second rounder, a late second rounder. So that's cool. Okay, so after Poitras, Cartier, Riker Evans. Actually, I'm surprised by him. Isn't he supposed to be? Or I guess now with Seattle, it's like at one point we were thinking like Riker Evans is the future on D, but now that they just signed like Montour, I wonder if that like makes you start to think like, oh, maybe Riker Evans isn't going to take over the top power play. Like, is he someone that you've been excited about before this offseason and maybe after?
I do really like Riker Evans. The funny thing about him is I think his comparable is Vince Dunn, who, is also on the Kraken. Like it's Vince Dunn 1.0 and Vince Dunn 2.0 playing together. I think he's going to be more of a physical force and with some offensive upside as opposed to a Brandon Montour type take everything over. But yeah, I think he's a decent shot to take. The one thing to keep in mind is he was drafted as an overager, so he's actually a year older than his draft year says.
Interesting. Okay. All right, so we'll see what happens in Seattle defense. We'll see if they have many Vince Dunns in the system. Okay, so then I'll finish off this round. So Green Tree, then Brandon Othman. I think that's actually a pretty good pick. I've seen a lot of people say that Othman is like the Rangers, or I guess Gabe Perreault. It's like Gabe Perreault and Othman are like top prospects. So we'll see if that turns out to turn out well. Nikolai Kovalenko, he could be in the NHL next year playing for Colorado. Luchenko, Brandon Bussi, who I think is Boston. Is it Bussy or Bussy? But he's apparently going to be like the backup one day to Swayman, is what people say. I think a lot of people were actually surprised that Boston like took on Korpisalo's contract because it's like, what are you going to have to waive Bussy now? And like maybe it's like an Askarov situation where it's not nice to him, but too bad. All right, then Marat Kushnetdinov of the
I feel
Wild.
like it might be my turn to start reading the names.
Okay, how about I'll throw to you when it's a name
Pretty
that I'm a
hard.
little bit concerned about.
Okay.
Carter George, Bobby Brink, who Bobby Brink is like a good win now guy, of course. He's
Pretty good
already
hockey
played
name
a bunch of
too.
games. Yeah, it's nice. Kale Fleury, that pick kind of surprised me. I know like Jeremy, you like the Kraken, but come on, Kale Fleury. I don't think he's like it's like I don't want to be this person, but
Yeah, I'd be surprised if Kale Fleury gets games for us this year. Like I think he's a seventh, eighth D injury replacement. I do like the talent, but like he's kind of one of those like post hype type guys that I don't think, unless he really shows something, I don't think he's going anywhere, unfortunately.
mm. Yeah, I think there's a couple defensemen who are going to go afterwards that I'd prefer. We've generally been positive, so sorry to to Prince. Okay, so Caden Primo then went to the Stony Devs, so there's a goalie that's going to play NHL games this year. That's pretty good. Like actually, I think he's another guy that's like Tarasov, who's about to lose his eligibility, and I think that's a reason why he fell. And obviously, we talked about how people are super excited about Jacob Fowler, and so maybe like the idea is the future maybe not be so bright anymore for Caden Primo, but he could surprise us. Nick Robertson from the Leafs. That's a pretty fun guy to get here. Then 3 defensemen to end the round. Brian, do you want to read this guy's name from Seattle?
Oh, okay. Is it
Nick
Lucas? Lukas Dragicevic.
Okay. So
Dragicevic.
there you go.
Dragicevic. It
Then
sounds Balkan.
Okay.
Slavic. Yeah.
He is a guy who was taken in the second round last year. 57th overall. Okay, Tanner Molendyke and then Stian Solberg. I have heard of this Solberg guy as someone who's going to be like a big hits and blocks person, not necessarily a good offensive guy. And that ends that round. I guess maybe after this we can start doing like a couple rounds at a time, and maybe I'll stop mentioning every name. But Jeremy, any names that jumped out at you from this round here? Where, by the way, you'll notice that Brian and I didn't even have a pick. At some point, we had to pay the piper for our Jack Hughes trade, where we traded up for picks in the minors draft, which got us Zellweger and got us also the pick that turned into Rucker McGroarty. But then we did have to give up some picks, and this was one of the rounds where it was very boring and sad to just not have a pick for a whole round.
I think you hit on one of my main points. Was I like the Kovalenko pick as far as someone who can contribute immediately and probably with some multi-cat ability. He's already 25, so I'm not expecting a rise to stardom, but he could be a good banger type guy. I Dragicevic in Seattle is a really, really boom bust player. Like, very long way to go on the defensive game, but the offensive talent is there. I haven't checked. I watched a bit of his tape last year after he was drafted. I have not checked in this year, so I don't know how much he's grown, or I don't actually know if he's going to be playing in the AHL again or the WHL next year. But making that level jump would be a big thing for him. And then I really like the people kind of cleaned up some of the 2024 first rounders who have high upside, Luchenko, Greentree, and Hage. I always like going for the high upside once the easier picks are done. Like, just shoot for the moon, and if you don't get them, then you drop them and get a new pick. One more, you mentioned Brandon Bussey. He's actually 26 years old, so I don't know how much like, it's not an Askarov situation where like he's young and ready to take over the net. He's kind of like at the age you'd expect, and they continue to block him. So I do wonder if Boston has a different opinion of him as the uh, fantasy or fan community at large does.
I wonder. So he must not be waivers eligible, right? So if they, I assume he's not going to make the team this year. If they're going to be playing Swayman and Corpusalo, so does that mean Bussi's going to go, or Bussi's going to end up going on waivers, or am I missing something? Because if you're
Uh,
26, usually you can't just clear like that.
yeah,
But
I don't know. He may have like one more year of eligibility because it looks like he's on a 1 year contract that puts him UFA at the end of the year. So
all
yeah,
right, so Boston's gonna have to figure something out. They
yeah.
Corpusalo's their problem now, not ours, right, Brian?
Yeah.
Adios. Get
I don't
out of
want him.
here.
He's out of. I'm like he's fully out of my life, and I'm happy with that. Until we like have to talk about him on the show, being like, Brian, Yonis Scorpusalo is on a heck of a run these days.
And you're gonna be so annoyed. You'll be like, "Don't even." But I don't think that'll happen because how's he going to? Unless Swayman gets injured. No, what's gonna happen is if Swayman gets injured, then I'm gonna be like, "Should people be rushing to grab Corpusalo?" And you'll be like,
Yeah.
like
But
if
you know
if
what? That
want
conversation's
starts-
easy. That conversation's easy. It's just when he has like 2 or 3 good starts together that I'm gonna have a bad time.
Right. Okay. Next round, and we've got a lot of rounds to go. This is round 34 we're getting to overall, and it's 50. There's been 52 rounds so far. We're not even done. It goes to 56. But we'll definitely end this in the next 15 minutes. If I assume, Jeremy, you've got places to be.
Yeah, it's dinner time over here, so I got to cook dinner.
All right, so let's just go through a couple more rounds, and then maybe I'll just jump to some players that I find interesting. Like in this next round, still some names going that I think are good. First of all, Logan Mailloux went, who is that Montreal defenseman who they got really late in the 2021 draft, and it was because of off-ice things. Apparently, he would have gone higher if it wasn't for that, and people were really mad at the Habs for taking him. Apparently, since then, he's like shown himself to be pretty good, and he had a really good year in the AHL last year, and a lot of people think he's going to have a future in the NHL, so he was definitely someone at the top of the watch list, and definitely someone I was thinking of taking with the next pick if he would have fallen. But he went, a goalie, Carl Lindbaum, went in this round, who has Vegas's, I guess, best prospect goalie, and he was someone I saw on a bunch of lists, so I was kind of bummed to see him go as maybe one of the last. Him, like Blomqvist went also in this round as Pittsburgh's top prospect goalie, so we're seeing a lot of the teams, you kind of just want, regardless of how good the goalie is, if it's your team's top prospect goalie, you might see him get some NHL games at some point. Anyways, Brian and I had a pick in this round, and I recall we were deciding between Marco Kasper and Zachary Leheureux. Kasper is someone who hopefully isn't a Broberg, but he was taken 8th overall in 2022 and has fallen a lot since then on prospect rankings, but still hasn't had his proper chance in the NHL, and we'll see if he's going to be able to make something of himself. He's still super young, only 20 years old. Detroit likes him, but it might just be more of like a IRL, like maybe really good at being a tough player, but not necessarily big offensive upside. But figured at this point in the draft was worth it. We were deciding between him and Leheureux, who we saw someone who got a ton of hits and apparently was a really big MVP of the playoffs last year in the minors. And he's at Predators' 27th overall pick from a few years back. So then Brian and I ended up trading up like a while later. In the next round, it was coming close to our pick, but we thought like there's like Lahuro's probably going to go really soon, so we gave a couple pick upgrades in future rounds to get him. So those are our next two guys actually, Casper and Lahura. In between that, I'll just say the names that jump out to me, and then Jeremy, you can say if there's any other names that jump out to you. But I know this guy from Calgary who Brian might have to pronounce, but I'll give it a try. Hunter Bruztiewicz. Some people have told me that he's like a high offensive pedigree potential guy for the Flames. Yeah, I know another 2024 guy, Boisvert, from that Chicago took. I know some people like him. But yeah, Oliver Bonk, someone who was taken last year that could be a good defenseman for Philly, son of former Ottawa Senator Radek Bonk, which was one of the best all-time names probably of the Ottawa Senators, right, Brian?
Such a good name. Such a great name. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's that round, and the following round, I guess at this point I'll just like kind of throw to Jeremy. Oh, there Siplikov got taken in that following round shortly after we took Lahura. He's a guy who's going to come from the KHL. Talked about him a few shows ago. Play for the Islanders, maybe a top sixer. This is not even as much of a prospect as just a guy who could potentially just come in and be an NHLer next year. Bobby McMahon got taken at the end of that round 35. Someone who came in and was a guy we talked about a lot on the podcast last year. We'll see next year if he actually has staying power as a significant guy on the Leafs. Jeremy, maybe do you want to just start as we're wrapping up here? Any guys in the next few rounds before, I guess like the next pick that Brian and I are going to make is going to be not for a little while, and we're going to take Liam Bichsel, who's a defenseman for Dallas. That's already a few rounds. So anyone up to that pick that you want to hone in on?
So I wanted to hone in on Fabian Lysell in the 34th round. Good Boston prospect. Maybe has lost some of his shine, but he's performing really well at a young age in the AHL. I think Boston has high hopes for him, given that how high they took him. I liked, let's see, in the 36th round. Where was your Liam Bichsel pick? The 37th.
That was in round 37, yeah.
Okay, the 36th round. I liked Colin Graff was kind of the hot college free agent signing this year. I think he played 4 years in college, so he's signing at 22. He signed in San Jose, somewhere where he may even play top 6 to start. I don't think he's top 6 long term unless he really pops off. But given how bad San Jose is currently, he could get some top 6 wing time this year and have a chance to prove himself. So I kind of think he has more upside than you'd think from someone who you hear undrafted, signed at age 22. And then 2 of my favorite second rounds 2024 draft guys were taken in the 36, and that was Alphonse Frege and Teddy Stiga. Teddy Stiga is just a high octane, do it all type forward who probably doesn't have, elite offensive skill, but he's going to be one of those guys that coaches love, and that will get him opportunities and ice time. And I think he's going to be a pretty good middle six player. And then Alphonse Frege is kind of a offensive defenseman who may or may not be able to make the NHL. I don't know exactly where that talent falls. Again, I actually struggle to analyze defensemen sometimes just because I look at it so much from a forward point of view. And then last but not least, if we want to jump down to right before your guys' pick, I had a goalie, actually 2 goalies. One of the goalies went after. So I have a goalie. You mentioned Blomqvist from Pittsburgh, who is their top prospect, probably going to see some games this year. They also brought over Sergei Murashov, who's significantly younger, was in the KHL last year and had a pretty good year. He's more a keep your eye on type for me, where I'm like really interested to see what his career looks like. I've kind of found that in the last 10 or so years, Russian goalies are suddenly really good. Like maybe it's a bit of a stereotyping, grouping them all together, but like I feel like there's so many big name Russian goalies coming over that like if a no name Russian is there, I'm like, oh, maybe he's in the same system or had the same coaches as these big name guys. So I definitely lend myself when I'm drafting to trusting Russian goalie development in the current day and age. And then the last guy that Brian already mentioned, though, is John Mustard, like A+ draft name, kind of. The description I saw of him was that he's like one of the fastest guys in the draft, but kind of has hands of stone. So he needs to work on that. And if he does, he could be a real game breaker for Chicago with all their other talent. Otherwise, he's just going to skate up and down the ice real fast and possibly not do anything. I'm thinking kind of like Michael Grabner used to, where he was so fast and then only sometimes scored.
Right, yeah, I remember highlights of Grabner, like just like getting awesome breakaways and then totally flubbing it.
So
Like,
many,
ah.
over and over.
And similarly, I have this thing when I watch the Oilers quite a bit because when they come to Seattle, I'll try to see them. I see a guy streaking down the ice with a 7 on the back of his jersey. I'm like, oh, it's Connor McDavid. 97's got the puck. No, it was 37, Warren Fogle. And it looked just like McDavid with the puck until he got close to the net and flubbed a shot or lost the puck. It was
Right.
like the speed and like the vision was just there. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the player.
It would be fun. Like every team has that player. Like I feel like every fan base knows who that guy is, who gets a disproportionate amount of chances that he has no chance of finishing. Like I remember in Ottawa, like Eric Condra used to get so many grade A breaks and rushes, and it's like it's not going in. Like it's so exciting, and then you see it's Eric Condra, you're like, oh, whatever, okay. Like this is nothing's. It might as well have been like a dump and chase kind of play. But like this is something that your fan base knows, right? So I'd like Grabner too. I'd be interested to know. Maybe in our episode discussion on our Discord server, drop your
team's Grabner.
your team's like breakaway loser.
That's funny. So before Brian and I took Bischel in the next round, another one of these Russians that I would be kind of interested in is Arseny Gritsyuk. I'll just throw his name out there.
That's
He's
a
guy
good
who's
name.
gonna, I think he's going to play one more year in the KHL and come over, and he's a guy for New Jersey that he might be able to just come in and make an impact right away because he's already 23 years old and already doing stuff in the K. But yeah, so I'll just maybe at this point, yeah, because we're basically done here. I'm just going to quickly name off the remaining people that Brian and I took.
If
and then Jeremy
Arseny Gritsyuk is a goalie, I don't know if he is.
No, he's a right wing.
Oh, okay. Well, still, if he ever has like a really great week and we talk about him on the show, the episode title will be Grand Arseny.
Okay, good one.
There it is.
All right, so I'm just going to say quickly the players that Brian and I took and a quick, 10-second reason why, and then throw to Jeremy for any final prospects he wants to talk about, and then we'll let Jeremy get to his dinner. But yeah, so we took Bischel with our next pick as someone who is just like a defenseman who's going to hit a lot. Brian and I still have to fill out some defense. You're going to see we're going to take a lot of D here. This is a guy I think no offensive upside for Dallas, but young, like big, huge person that will hopefully fill some categories. We took Nicholas Kakko, a Seattle goalie. Jeremy, Seattle, come on, we got to cheer for Kakko together. They don't really have many goalies in their pipeline, right? So I figured he has a decent chance.
The goalie pipeline's pretty rough, I will say.
Yeah, so we'll see if he ends up doing anything. We took Arbor Chekai from Montreal, partly because he's awesome. And Brian, obviously, that's like a name that everyone knows so well now that it's boring. But like his name starts with XHEJK. Like it's like an amazing spelling
Big
name.
Points for uniqueness. Absolutely.
Yeah, and he was someone that like he's going to lose his minors eligibility soon. He's already played 95 games, but we just figured at this point in the draft we need. You've heard us talk about our D in the pro draft. Like we have nobody, so I'm happy to bump like a Kevin Ball, and put an Arbor Chekai if he's actually playing games and getting like a ton of hits like he did last year, and he shoots a decent amount. For a defenseman. Our next pick, we took Xavier Bourgault, who is the guy who the Oilers really flubbed it when they could have taken Wallstead, but instead they traded down and took this guy Bourgault in the first round of 2021. And now they've already given up on him and sent it to the Sens for like a bag of pucks. I don't know, some other prospect that no one cares about. So we'll see. I'm not expecting much, but figured at that point take a first rounder. Ethan Del Mastro, a defenseman. Then we took, another goalie, Jacob Dobesh, who was apparently in Montreal's system. At that point, I really saw it as like a teardrop. Like we weren't necessarily looking for a goalie there, but figured like after Dobesh, he's someone like the last guy who I saw on like a few lists still of people's top 20 goalie prospects. Then yeah, there's really nothing to talk about the rest of these guys. Butchinger is a defenseman on St. Louis who apparently has some offensive upside. Christian Kyrou, brother of Jordan. Jack Devine, who apparently had a really good year in college and might be good for Florida one day. Brett Berard apparently was good for the Rangers. Is this interesting, me just telling the guys? I just want to tell people on my team. People can tweet at us if they think they like any of these players. But yeah, Danny Nelson was a second-round pick for the Islanders. Then a guy who I saw on some list, Rodwin Dionisio, is a defenseman prospect for Anaheim. So Brian, we've got Zellweger. Now we even have Dionisio if Zellweger doesn't work out. Apparently he has some offensive upside. Then we took Victor Soderstrom, who I just like felt like at this point, like, okay, everyone's talking about Broberg so much. Soderstrom is like the same. He was taken 3 picks after Broberg in 2019. He's also turned into a big bust, and Broberg's now making 4.5 mil, and some people must think he's good. So maybe it'll be the same for Victor Soderstrom, but I don't actually think so. But figured an 11th overall pick at this point, why not? Then I took this like guy who from Toronto who I'd never heard of, but I saw some article from Elite Prospects about how Noah Chadwick like really had a good year in the minors for the Leafs, and he's now one of their like really higher end defenseman prospects. Even though he was drafted in like the 5th round in 2023 or 6th round. So figured why not. And then the last pick, a Seattle guy, and actually it's our pick right now. So after the draft we'll do, but like the last pick we've taken so far as of now is a guy Seattle took, Clark Caswell, who I saw that Seattle actually traded up to take him in this past draft. So that's good, but it was still like the 5th round or something.
You know,
but
I actually now that you say that out loud, I actually wonder if that's like a bit of a deep dynasty draft cheat code. Like I'm curious to know how often when teams trade up for a player, if that is at all correlated with a higher
that would
rate
be
of
fun
success
to check
in the NHL.
because it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Like they clearly were like, I really hope we can get Clark Caswell in the 5th round, and at this point, I don't think he's gonna make it. So we're gonna have to give up something to trade up to get him. So they must like him. Apparently, he got a lot of points in the Elite Prospects guide that I was looking at. Like the guy who was reviewing him was saying how like he looks really good, and he's just like one of these typical like undersized. So that's why NHL teams don't value him, but maybe he'll be something. Clark Caswell, mark it down. Let's check back in 3 years.
But so if it is, even if it like if we don't know if it is true, then definitely this is a good guideline to draft by. Like I would just be like I'd be making a list of all the guys that teams traded up to get that they felt so worried that they would miss out. I think that could be worth a little draft bump in a dynasty. It's a thought, just putting it out there.
That's definitely an interesting thing to think of. I know I look for specific teams that I'm like, oh yeah, this NHL team drafts really well, and you always hear about their 3rd or 4th rounder who becomes a superstar. So I kind of keep my eye on a couple specific teams, and if I'm, taking the 50th or 60th pick from just the 2024 guys, I'm like, oh yeah, let's go find this team and see who they took in the 2nd and 3rd round. And
so
see
who
if
are the
still
teams?
There.
Who are the teams on the top of your list?
Currently, I really like Dallas and
of course,
Nashville. I think drafts really well.
I was definitely going to say like, that's a Dallas story right there.
That's definitely Dallas is the hot one in the like prospect community these days. Carolina kind of used to be like, it was always like Carolina was drafting off of the fantasy guys prospect sheets was the joke. It's hard to tell because it seems like some of their more recent ones are busts, but I still definitely keep an eye on Carolina, especially their European scouting department. I find to be particularly good over in like Finland and Sweden and Russia.
So Jeremy, before we I've gone over like so many rounds, like hundreds of players that got drafted in these rounds. Is there any like final names you just want to throw out there as like this was a steal super late in the prospects draft that people like we should pay attention to for a couple years down the road?
Yeah, I've got a handful that I had pulled out.
Please.
This is in the interest of high upside, but possibly low floor. So I'm just going for guys that like could really be big fantasy contributors, but also could completely miss.
Never play.
Yeah. I like Jordan Dumais. He's an undersized Blue Jackets prospect, put up like more than 2 points per game in the QMJHL, and then got hurt last year. So he's kind of like on the downswing. It'll be really important for him to transition to the AHL next year. He's only listed at 5'9", 165, which could be part of why he ended up injured last year, but he's got a ton of talent if the size doesn't get him. Next up, I had Gleb Trikozov, another Carolina pick. He is a Russian guy who has not really played in the KHL yet, but has a lot of talent. It's a second rounder from 2022. So we'll see if that one sticks. That's kind of, you want to see him in the KHL though at this point if he's, getting a bit older. Next up, I had Georgy Merkulov. He's a 24-year-old Boston prospect who was basically point per game in the AHL last year, like kind of a late bloomer. I think he was undrafted also. So kind of came through USHL to NCAA, and then last year had 65 points in 67 games for Providence. So that's kind of interesting, especially since there's a lot of room for, a Boston guy to kind of jump into that third or second line. I like Adar Suniev, kind of a boom bust prospect, Calgary drafted.
Oh, nice. I have him in my other dynasty.
Yeah, there you
Woo.
go. He was a BCHL guy, so he didn't really get much draft hype. He got drafted in the third round of 2023, but kind of out of the BCHL, so there was a lot less tape on him. And he went to University of Massachusetts this year. He was okay, and just looking to build on that. I suspect he'll play 3 or 4 years in college, but has potential to be something when he comes out. Alexander Suzdalev, a Caps prospect who's kind of like a playmaking winger. He's bounced back and forth between Sweden and the WHL. I don't know what they're going to do with him this year. I think his stock has kind of fallen a bit, but I still believe I'd really like to see him stick in like the AHL this year because I think he's finally eligible. I think that was the problem, is I don't think he wanted to play juniors, and then he went back to Sweden to play, and obviously the numbers weren't very good because he's a 20-year-old playing in a men's league. Guy that Seattle drafted, Julius Miettinen, was a 2024 pick. I think he was like their third or fourth rounder. Has kind of power forward vibes, like he's 6'3", over 200 pounds. May just be the type of guy who can post up in front of the net on a power play and slam home goals. And last but not least, I like Massimo Rizzo, a late draft pick. I think he was drafted by Carolina, but recently got his rights traded to Philly. And he played 3 years at University of Denver, was a pretty good college performer, and will be looking to crack the NHL or AHL roster this year. I think that's got some upside. And, if he can't crack the roster in the next year or two because he's on the older side, you could just safely cut him. So that's the type of guy that I really like in a league like this, is one where you'll know sooner rather than later whether or not he's worth anything. And then as soon as that contract ends, or if you want to take a small cap hit for a ELC type contract, you can just cut him and have the roster spot for someone else.
Yeah, that's definitely handy.
Yeah, those were all the guys I had pulled out from the rounds, 37 through 52. It's such a long draft.
Yeah, we're still going. It's our pick right now. I'll tell you, the guy I'm looking at right now, just tell me if you've heard of him. Apparently, Corey Stillman's son, Chase Stillman, was a first-round pick for the Devils back in 2021. Still hasn't gotten any NHL time, but I'm looking at him now as maybe someone. I saw some articles when I searched his name on Google, like that maybe he might get into the NHL next season and he'll finally get his opportunity to show what he has, which I assume is not very much. But Brian, is there anything to you about, like, all else equal, taking the son of a former NHLer? Does that like move the needle one way or the other?
No, I think generally, I mean, like, there's a lot of bias, right? Like, I think we'd actually need to compile data here. I was actually, by the way, I did look up Patrick Waugh. I saw his number was retired back in 2008, which is why we don't remember. Okay, it's for, like, I feel like I can picture the retirement ceremony, actually, like him in his jersey and like waving to the crowd and whatever. But I'm bringing this up because as I learned about that, I also came across an article about his son, like, crossing the ice in the QMJHL to have a goalie fight. So, like, in that case, like, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Although, if I would want to just live up to that name. Like, that would be fun. Yeah, I don't know, Elon. I think there's a lot of guys who get this far because of their name, because of their family name, and I think some of them earn it more than others. I don't get the sense, one guy who, like, is an interesting recent example to me is Owen Tippett, who, I think I believe he's the son of Dave. Like I'm double checking this on Elite Prospects now. But I remember when he was drafted, I'm like, I wonder if he gets drafted if he wasn't. And like Dave Tippett has like such a great reputation in the hockey community, or last I checked.
He is not related.
Oh, he's not. So who is Dave Tippett? Dave Tippett, I feel like has a son who was drafted, or maybe I'm wrong about this.
Well, either way.
Either way. Okay. No, so maybe I'm wrong on that. All this to say, it doesn't. I don't think it matters much. Like I think there's cause to be. Look at the Kachucks, right? It's like, oh well, like Keith Kachuk knows what it takes. Like this is the narrative I can build, and he also knows how to like navigate all the BS and like bureaucracy or whatever, like the world of hockey. And he's, I think, raised 2 kids to do that very well, both on like the business side and the hockey side. But I think for every pair of Kachucks, there's a pair or more of guys who are not. So no, the long answer is no. I don't.
Okay, I'm not taking Chase. Okay, I know who I'm going to take, Brian. It's not Chase Stillman. I'm going to pick him live on the air, and then we'll end the show. I'm taking a guy who I think you might like his name.
Okay.
Because his last name is a body part. Not a body part, but like a organ, an internal organ.
Is it liver? Pancreas?
No, try again.
Now we find out how many organs I can. It's not stomach.
Liver was close.
Lungs?
No.
Skin?
As long as it's not Carter Hart, you're not allowed to draft Carter Hart. I'm banning you from doing that.
Skin is an organ.
No, it's I think it's the part that's responsible for like when the alcohol comes
Intestine.
in. You know, people are always like, "Oh no, my poor blank! I'm drinking so much alcohol. They're going to really
liver?
suffer." I thought it's a different thing.
Well, what do you
Sounds like
think it is?
The kidney.
I
don't know. Is it liver or kidney?
I don't.
What
know.
do kidneys do?
They grow stones.
All right, so that's true. Well, we're gonna grow some stones and draft Riley Kidney from the Montreal Canadiens.
That is a pretty good name. I was actually I'm all prepped, by the way. Like there's been a rash of great names just towards the end here.
Oh,
with
shoot.
The
All right, how about this?
97th pick, Akurati was picked, and the fact that his brother is Atu definitely like lends to the.
That's
the
like a
appeal of
WWE tag team, Aku and Atu.
You're thinking of Samu and Fatu for sure.
Yes. Wait, well, okay. Before you continue, Jeremy, do you have to go? Because
what's for dinner?
I'm cooking chicken tacos tonight, so got to get down and like cook the chicken and then do the veggie stir fry and stuff.
Okay.
All right. So how about let's thank Jeremy for his
Jeremy.
time. We really appreciate you being here. People were really excited for this part 2 after we dropped part 1, and you definitely delivered. So yeah, everyone in the Discord, please share more compliments to Jeremy because he definitely did an amazing job. We really appreciate it, and looking forward to hearing you on Short Shifts and some Matchup Maximizer next season. So yeah, enjoy your chicken tacos.
Thank you. Have a great summer, guys.
See you.
Thanks.
Just
it's almost over, but thank you.
Off air, if you could just like leave your thing open once you just to make sure it like uploads.
Do I need to like leave studio and then it'll
I think
upload?
like stay in the studio. I'll end stream. If you could just stay in the studio, then I think it'll be fine.
I'll just leave it muted and turn my camera and mic off.
Okay, beautiful. All right, see ya. All right.
I'm so embarrassed about the Dave Tippett thing.
It's okay. I would have thought that. All right, let's end the show. All right. And now back to you, Brian. Any other fun names before we wrap up the show here? Okay,
so I think the 1,003rd pick in our whole Dynasty draft, this isn't just prospects, was Gunnar Fontaine, which is like a solid, like Gunnar is not an automatic entry, but I think Fontaine on the back end. 2 picks later was Viggo Gustafsson. I like that. Mikko Matika came a couple picks later. Elon, you already mentioned Clark Caswell. I think that's a solid name. Just before him, William Zellers. If he were a goalie, the lowest goals against average would be the law. There's a joke for our Canadians who are 35 years or older. And that concludes my name analysis for the moment. You know, we're leaving guys out, but
there's definitely some good NHL names in more. There was an
they're not
Amadeus.
NHL yet. That's the thing.
Imagine naming your kid Amadeus. That's pretty cool.
Amadeus was I did just move past that one because I didn't think like Gunnar Wolf. It's a high candidate based on the first name. I don't think the last name. What's the last name?
Of Gunnar Wolf?
No, Amadeus.
I don't remember.
It doesn't bring it home. Doesn't Lombardi. Amadeus Lombardi.
Also, the second Elias Pettersson got taken. The Canucks have 2 Elias Petterssons, and they're both rostered in our dynasty. But okay, with that, Brian, I think we should wrap this up here. So yeah, this is our last Summer Series episode. This is the end of the Summer Series. Hopefully people enjoyed it. Next up, we're going to take a week off next week, and then we're going to come guns a-blazing. September, we're going to be hitting you with Schmore Goalies board, where we're going to tier all the goalies. We're going to be hitting you with Charcuter D, where we're going to tier the defensemen. We're going to have an interview with Dom Luszczyszyn about his rankings. I'm going to have the show with Victor, talk about Calder candidates. We're going to have our Tier 1 auction draft. It's going to be incredible, so definitely make sure you're subscribed to Keeping Karlsson, as we always have a lot of fun in September. And also, of course, please consider joining our Patreon community and signing up to register for the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League. I know after listening to all this, you're excited about Dynasty, but one-year leagues are fun too, and the Couple is the best one out there. You're going to have a ton of fun in a super competitive league. So if you're up for the challenge, I would definitely recommend joining the Couple, the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, to see how you measure up. If you played last year, you still need to register. So if you were planning on doing so, please do that soon, because the deadline is September 1st when we release that goalie episode. So yeah, with that, Brian, I'll throw to you to say anything else along with reading the credits, because I've cued the outro music. Off to Brian.
Oh, wasn't ready. I should have been ready. Obviously.
Whenever you're ready.
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dauber Hockey, our very, very good friends whose relationship we appreciate at dauberhockey.com. Thank you to, and powered by our patrons. Thanks to our Cupful coordination team, Kevin and Jay Brew. I don't know if, or John, I'll have to ask what he prefers, for getting us, helping us get ready for the next season 10 of the Cupful. Your time to register, like, you've got 2 weeks, all right? Just get on it. Don't wait. Don't wait till it's too late. Elon and Sham still tweeting or retweeting over at GameDayTweets.com. Thank goodness. And logo art by BrandonWeeb.com. Outro music by Pat Roach. And a little shout out to our friend Edward at like40.com, the number 40, like40, who's gonna help update our cupful.com, kkupfl.com pyramid scheme. The league is not a pyramid scheme, but the way that promotions and relegations work is indeed a pyramid scheme, and one that we're proud of. This episode was researched with help from Dauber Hockey, Frozen Tools, Dauber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Puckpedia, The Athletic, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, and Fantrax.
All right, great job as always, Brian, and thanks again to Jeremy for stopping by.
Oh, and thank you to our super supporters: Paul, Roman, Don, Michael, Brian, Patrick, Aaron, Philip, Ivan, Sammy, Andrea, Zach, Tom, Ryan, David, Ricard, and Patty.
You are all the best. You keep us going all the way to our next episode, Schmore Goalies board. Brian, while we're preparing goalie tiers, what should everyone else do as they enjoy their last couple weeks of August?
Well, get ready for Schmore Goalies board, and while you are, keep doing what you can to make sure that anyone who wants to play fantasy hockey or have questions about it or join in or get involved can do that, because fantasy hockey is for everyone.
See ya. Thanks for anyone who watched live. We have 6 people here. That's awesome. But
I'm glad you didn't tell me that before. Stage fright.
Okay. All right. See you, everyone. Brian, stick around, please, just so we can make sure the file uploads. Bye.
Bye, and thanks, everybody.
And stream.